The illegitimate daughter my father brought home bound a mind-reading system to me, in my past life. Because of this system, she manipulated me like a puppet, made a complete fool of me, and turned everyone against me. In the end, she schemed to have me killed, completely usurping my position. After being reborn, my grandma says she doesn't like girls who do housework, calling them cheap. Little does she know, what she truly despises is laziness and gluttony. My dad loves to sing and thinks he's amazing at it. Little does he know, he's completely tone deaf. My little brother's favorite food is mango cake. Little does he know, he's actually allergic to mangoes. The top student says he doesn't like good girls, only bad girls. Little does he know, what he really can't stand are people with no ambition. If I don't make her life a living hell this time, it's on me. 3 years after my mother's death, my father finally brought his illegitimate daughter, Ruby, home. On the surface, she seemed timid, fearful, and completely at a loss, yet her gaze, watching me from the shadows, was smug and cunning. I knew she had somehow bound a mind-reading ability to me. In my past life, she used that ability to read my thoughts, learning everything about my family's situation and each member's preferences. She quickly won them all over, drove a wedge between me and my family, and manipulated me like a puppet. Finally, when she grew bored, she pushed me off the rooftop and claimed I had jumped to my death due to depression. One more time, if I don't make her life a living hell, I'm disrespecting the heavens. Grandma, Dad, sister, brother, Ruby greeted all of us timidly. When Ruby first came to our house, nobody wanted anything to do with her. Her mother used underhanded tactics. While my mother was pregnant with me, she took the opportunity to get my father drunk, drugged him, and ultimately had relations with him. My father tried to pay her off to settle the matter. Little did he know, a year later, her mother secretly gave birth to Ruby. Initially, my father wanted nothing to do with her, but in the end, he couldn't deny she was his own flesh and blood. He still sent money to them every month, though he almost never spent time with them. Even after my mother passed away from illness, my father still refused to bring them home. Later, seeing no hope of securing a permanent position, her mother abandoned Ruby and married an old man. With no other choice, my father took the 16-year-old Ruby back into our home. She looked at us with pleading eyes, hoping for a response. I was also waiting, lost in my own thoughts. For example, in my previous life, my inner monologue went something like this: none of us in the family want her here. My grandmother despises illegitimate children the most. Father only let her come back because she had nowhere else to go. It was just out of pity. She'd better keep her head down and behave after moving in, or my grandmother will definitely throw her out. Then, Ruby immediately started playing along. I know my mom is awful, and I don't like her either. All these years, I've been trying to persuade her not to disturb your lives. I won't be a burden for long. I know my place. Once I've saved up enough from working, I'll leave on my own accord. Thank you for taking me in for now. I'll keep my head down and won't cause you too much trouble. Her words instantly won over the whole family, laying a solid foundation for her future standing in our household. But now, a cold smile played on my lips. It was time for you to learn the bitter taste of your own medicine, too. Just as Ruby wished, my internal monologue began. Grandma and Dad have always felt guilty about Ruby. Now that she's back, they're definitely going to make it up to her. Grandma drilled it into us that my brother and I absolutely must get along peacefully with Ruby. Dad says we have to give in to Ruby on everything. She's suffered so much out there. She's the real treasure of our family now. I noticed a subtle shift in Ruby's expression. The look of bewildered fear vanished in an instant, replaced by a sudden surge of confidence. Putting on a wounded air, she said, "I've suffered so much with my mother. People called me a bastard child. Said I was raised without a father. I never had enough to eat or wear growing up, and my mother often mistreated me. I've wanted to come back to this family and be with you all for a long time. Well, that's settled. From now on, our family will never have to be apart again." I saw my grandmother's face darken instantly. After all, my grandmother had never acknowledged this illegitimate daughter. She only reluctantly agreed to let Ruby come back on my father's insistence. And that was contingent on Ruby's future behavior. And now, look at this. She's the first one to start calling us family. My father's expression darkened as well. Ruby's remarks about having a mother but no father to raise her, and not having enough to eat or wear, were a clear indictment of my father's neglect. My father already resented her and her mother for their scheming. How dare she turn around and blame him? "Where is my room? I'm tired and would like to rest," Ruby said. Growing more composed by the minute, it's like she's completely oblivious to my grandma's and my dad's moods. That makes sense. In her mind, if she can control me, she can control the whole family. She can't even be bothered to try and figure out what anyone else is thinking. "Summer, take Ruby to her room," my dad called to me. My current attitude towards Ruby is simply, out of sight, out of mind. "Okay." I nodded obediently and led Ruby to her room. "Sis, can I take a look at your room?" Ruby set down her luggage and said to me in an ingratiating tone, "In my past life, I thought she was just genuinely curious. It wasn't until the moment I died that I realized her goal, from the very moment she stepped into this house, was to usurp my position as the eldest daughter of the Xia family." Sure, I played along with her scheme and took Ruby to my room. Naturally, my room was larger and more luxurious than hers. "Sis, your room is so big and beautiful," Ruby said, green with envy. It was the same in my past life. She was practically itching to snatch my room away. In the end, I died, and she did indeed get her wish and moved in. "Your room is quite nice too," I said innocently. "Grandma had the servants prepare it especially for you. How could it possibly compare to yours?" Ruby said, her voice dripping with envy. In my past life, when faced with Ruby's jealousy, I thought to myself, is Ruby seriously thinking about taking my room? If she dares to ask, my grandma will kick her out for sure. But here's what I was really thinking. Wait, does Ruby actually want my room? If she asks grandma for it, she'll definitely say yes. After all she's been through, grandma would want to make it up to her. I could see the expression on Ruby's face change completely. She didn't linger, making an excuse before she left. Watching her cheerful figure retreat, my smile grew brighter and more cruel. 3. Early the next morning, Ruby was bustling about in the open-plan kitchen at home. In our past life, this was how she won over our entire family. This time, I deliberately walked up to her and said, "Ruby, you're amazing. I had no idea you could cook." But what I was really thinking was, what should I do? Should I tell Ruby that grandma absolutely despises girls doing housework? She says it's degrading, that a girl should be pampered and live a life of leisure. The next moment, I saw Ruby hurriedly dump all the breakfast she had made. She said nervously, "Who said I can cook? I've never lifted a finger to do a single chore since I was a child." She spoke very loudly. It seemed to be said deliberately for grandma to hear, who had just come downstairs. A faint, knowing smile played on my lips. Our family has always had solid values, whether you're a boy or a girl. And even if we have help at home, everyone is expected to pitch in with the chores. My brother and I were never the type of spoiled young master and miss who expected everything to be handed to us. I saw my grandma's face immediately fall, her displeasure with Ruby written all over it. Ruby, completely oblivious, was perfectly at ease. Later, when the servant had wordlessly remade breakfast and the family was seated at the table, Ruby remained incredibly haughty. Even ordering the servant to hand her breakfast directly, I could see both my grandma and my dad were on the verge of slapping her across the face. "Grandma, I didn't sleep well at all last night," Ruby suddenly spoke up. My grandma had absolutely no desire to engage with her, but remembering that she had prepared the room for Ruby, she asked dutifully, "What's wrong? The bed is too hard, the quilt isn't warm enough, and I don't like the room's decor either. It's too dreary and rigid." My grandma's face turned livid. She was practically grinding her teeth as she asked, "Well, what kind do you like?" "I love my sister's room. It's so big and beautiful, exactly the kind of room I've always dreamed of having," Ruby said, looking at my grandma with hopeful eyes. She was just waiting for my grandma to agree on the spot and give her my room, for I could see my grandma was absolutely furious, practically steaming with anger. She finally couldn't hold back and lashed out at Ruby. "Just look at who you are. How dare you have the nerve to ask for Summer's room, Ruby? The fact that our family even lets you through the door is already doing you a favor. You'd better know your place." Ruby was stunned by my grandma's outburst, her face flushing with waves of hot, burning red. It was clearly awkward and humiliating. I knew she was about to suspect me, so I immediately offered up my inner thoughts. Why would Grandma say that to Ruby? Is it because Ruby said she didn't like the room Grandma personally prepared, and that hurt her feelings? But given how guilty Grandma feels towards Ruby, she probably won't hold a grudge for long. Maybe Grandma will even regret scolding Ruby like that and end up apologizing to her. Gradually, the color returned to Ruby's face as she calmed down. She said, "Grandma, I was wrong. I didn't know you had put so much thought into preparing this room for me, even if I don't like it. I won't let your effort go unappreciated." Far from sounding apologetic or grateful, her words came off as if she were the one making a great sacrifice and being incredibly understanding. My grandma was so furious she threw down her chopsticks and left, but Ruby didn't give it a second thought. She was convinced that Grandma, out of guilt, would apologize to her first and then effortlessly take my room. After breakfast, we headed off to school. Ruby is only half a year younger than me. My dad enrolled her in the same private, elite school and even the same class as me, just like in my previous life. On her very first day of school, Ruby fell head over heels for Ethan, the smartest and most handsome guy in her class. It wasn't just her, though. Over half the girls in school had a crush on him. The rest just didn't think they stood a chance and didn't dare to like him. But Ethan was aloof. Aside from his studies, nothing else held his interest. He particularly despised anything that could distract him from his work, and teenage romance was at the top of that list. In my past life, I too harbored a quiet affection for Ethan, planning to confess my feelings only after the college entrance exams were over. I've been studying hard all along, just to keep up with him, but ever since Ruby arrived, she read my mind and recited the love letter I had prepared, word for word, in front of the whole class. The emotions of girlhood are always so sincere and cringy. The contents of that love letter made a complete fool of me. With a look of feigned concern, Ruby said she was only trying to help me. She claimed she never expected Ethan to turn me down, and what's worse, he did it in the most humiliating way. He gave me his reply right in front of the whole class. "Summer, I always thought you were a diligent, well-behaved, and ambitious girl. I never imagined your mind was filled with such vulgar, love-struck nonsense. It's downright disgraceful. Sorry, but I could never like a girl like you." My parents were called into the school over it. They said I was dating too young, corrupting other students, and ruining the class atmosphere. Even walking through the school, I'd get pointed at and whispered about by other students. I became depressed for a while, so ashamed and mortified that I was afraid to even go to school. During that time, both my grandma and my father were deeply disappointed in me. Eventually, they had no choice but to send me to a very ordinary public school. Ruby, however, received the finest education at the most prestigious private school. Yet, what surprised me most was that Ethan, who swore he wouldn't date in high school, still ended up in a relationship with Ruby. Recalling all those past events, I struggled to swallow the surge of rage welling up inside me. Next, I'm going to make Ruby's life a living hell. 5. Ruby was lost in her love at first sight infatuation with Ethan. Suddenly, I heard my own inner voice. "I like Ethan so much." I noticed Ruby finally snapped out of it. Her eyes, whether intentional or not, drifted toward me, a glint of mischief sparkling in their depths. A faint smile touched the corner of my mouth. For Ruby, liking someone didn't necessarily mean she had to have them, but if it was something I liked, she would make it a point to take it for herself. So I need to make her understand my feelings for Ethan. I just won't be foolish enough to give her any leverage over me again. But Ethan doesn't like the good girl type, he's into the bad girls, I added in my thoughts. Ruby's brow visibly furrowed as well. It must have seemed pretty unbelievable to them too. Who would have thought a clean-cut guy like Ethan would have such unconventional tastes? But my personality is nothing like a delinquent girl's. I guess I'll never be able to catch up with Ethan. Huh? I saw a triumphant smile curl at the corner of Ruby's lips. To be honest, even before Ruby set foot in the Sia household, she had a terrible reputation at her old school. She skipped class, smoked, bullied the weak, had early relationships, dyed her hair, and wore super short skirts. She was a total delinquent. My saying that played right into her hands. I could see from the look on her face that she was absolutely certain she would succeed. She just knew Ethan was meant for her, and so it began. From that very day, Ruby's appearance was a world apart from when she first arrived at the house. First, she went and dyed her hair. She dyed her hair blonde. Then, she modified her school uniform skirt, shortening it so much that a slight bend would reveal her underwear. She didn't pay attention in class and was openly defiant towards the teacher. After class, she'd meet up with a few troublemakers to smoke in the bathroom, her speech laced with constant profanity. In the end, she even joined those troublemaker girls in bullying the timid students, and her parents got called to the school, but she showed no remorse. After all, I would occasionally confide in her. Ethan must like someone like Ruby, right? I can tell by the way he looks at her. It's different. He's always sneaking glances. I'm so nervous. Why can't I be more like Ruby? She's just so cool. If Ruby confesses to Ethan now, there's no way he'd say no, right? Ruby probably felt the time was right, so, during a certain evening self-study session, Ruby, wearing heavy makeup, a crop top, and a miniskirt, walked right up to Ethan in front of the whole class, chewing gum. There are no teachers present during evening self-study at private schools. Students work on their homework in the classroom of their own accord. Her action instantly grabbed the attention of the entire class. Ethan shot Ruby a sidelong glare. The disgust in his eyes couldn't have been more obvious, yet Ruby remained completely oblivious. She said, "Ethan, I know you've had your eye on me for a while. I'm giving you a chance now. Be my boyfriend." 6. Every single pair of eyes in the class was fixed on Ruby. No one could believe that Ruby had actually confessed her feelings to Ethan. Everyone knew Ethan was completely focused on his studies. While Ruby and he were on completely different paths, Ethan was probably stunned. He stared at Ruby, speechless for a long moment. Ruby thought Ethan was simply overjoyed, and the smug curve of her smile grew more pronounced. She said, "Still need to think it over. I don't have all day for you to hesitate. Have you lost your mind?" Ethan finally snapped back to reality, his words leaving no room for tact. "What makes you think I could ever like you?" Ruby stared at Ethan wide-eyed, as if she couldn't believe what he had just said. "A girl like you, lazy, content to just coast through life, picking on those weaker than you, and dragging down public morals. Don't even talk about me liking you. The mere fact that you have feelings for me is a disgrace." Ethan's sharp tongue was legendary. He didn't care who you were. If you crossed him, he could eviscerate you with words alone. I saw Ruby's face flush completely red. I know that feeling all too well in this moment. After all, I was exactly the same back then, just like that, in front of the whole class. Ethan's words made me want to die of shame. I thought you liked girls like me." Ruby's tone was noticeably weaker. It was a complete transformation from her previously haughty demeanor. "How much clearer do I need to be, Ruby? Being around someone like you makes me sick to my stomach. Just sharing the same air feels disgusting." Ruby was driven to tears by Ethan's words. "How could you say that to me? And why shouldn't I say it? Just look at what you're wearing. It's an absolute eyesore. And look at your usual behavior, not paying attention in class, swearing after school, smoking, bullying other students. You've done every single thing a student shouldn't do." Ethan finished in one breath, without even pausing. "What? You think you can do all that and not have anyone call you out on it? You. Ruby stammered out the word 3 times, unable to form a complete sentence. "Don't stand there, you're polluting my air." Without so much as another glance at Ruby, Ethan lowered his head and started on his homework. At this, a wave of snide remarks began to ripple through the class. How could she have the nerve? A guy like Ethan is way out of her league. Did she forget to look in the mirror before she left the house? I heard she's the daughter of a mistress. No wonder she has no shame. Looking at Summer and Ruby, it's like comparing heaven and earth. It seemed Ruby had remembered me at that moment. Her crimson-rimmed eyes glared at me with a hatred so intense it felt like she wanted to tear me to pieces. 7. I know Ruby is starting to suspect me. Of course, I won't let her catch me red-handed. After all, it's not enough yet, not even close. So, the moment my eyes met Ruby's, I blurted out what was on my mind. "How can this be?" That's exactly what Ethan said when he rejected me last time. He said he only likes cool girls, not a goody two-shoes like me. He said he can't stand bookworms. What he really likes are girls with strong personalities and minds of their own. Ruby clearly met every single one of Ethan's criteria, so why would he reject her? Unless, I feigned surprise. I saw Ruby staring straight at me. She had clearly taken the bait. Could it be that Ethan fabricated this lie on purpose to reject my confession, to make me back off? Ruby's entire face flushed crimson with rage, utterly furious and frustrated. She probably couldn't accept that she had been misled by her own inner voice, causing her to lose all face and be utterly mortified. To make matters worse, just then, the homeroom teacher appeared in the classroom. Without a moment's hesitation, Ethan immediately tattled to the teacher, saying Ruby had confessed her feelings to him and it was disrupting his studies, and that was that. The teacher showed Ruby no mercy, right in front of the whole class. He called my father and told him to take Ruby home for some serious reflection and discipline. Being summoned to school yet again was a huge embarrassment for my father. He lost all patience with Ruby after that. My grandma had finally had enough and gave her an ultimatum. Ruby, if you get your parents called to school one more time, don't blame me for being harsh. I'll kick you out of this house. Ruby was suspended from school for a week. In the first few days, her despondency, even her breakdown, was painfully obvious. She cried so much her eyes were swollen every day, but after a few more days, she seemed to bounce back as if nothing had happened, pulling herself together again. After all, she can read minds. She thinks she has me completely figured out. This Ethan situation is just a minor setback, no big deal, but Ruby has gotten wiser. She's aware of her family's disappointment in her lately, especially in her pursuit of Ethan. She had transformed herself into a bit of a wild child, so she decided to make amends and repair her image with her family. She dyed her hair black, stopped wearing makeup, and switched to a proper school uniform. On the day she returned to class, she even delivered a formal apology to my grandma and my dad. Her apology was delivered with genuine emotion and heartfelt remorse. I could see my grandma and my dad were visibly moved, and their prejudice against Ruby was starting to fade. Ruby was feeling quite smug about it. She probably thought that if she put her mind to it, winning over my family, or even replacing me, would be a piece of cake. But I wasn't worried. Let her gloat for now. The higher she climbs, the harder she'll fall. The school's annual singing competition officially began. Ruby signed up with great enthusiasm. I signed up too. However, in her previous life, Ruby stole the show and basked in all the glory. But in this life, she certainly won't be allowed to hog the spotlight this time. 8. On the day of the singing competition finals, the school invited all the students, teachers, and the contestants' parents to watch live. The atmosphere was electric. My grandma, my dad, and my little brother all came to the venue to support Ruby and me. My grandma loves music and is a wonderful singer, even though she doesn't sing modern pop songs. Her folk songs are melodious and hauntingly beautiful. In my previous life, I had wanted to invite my grandmother to be my guest performer for the live duet segment. Little did I expect that Ruby, having somehow read my mind, would get to grandma first and secure her as her own guest singer. Left with no choice, I had to bring my little brother on stage, and we ended up singing Two Tigers together. After all, my father didn't inherit any of grandma's vocal talent. He's completely tone deaf. Although my brother's sweet, childish voice was adorable, he lacked professional technique, which failed to win over the judges. Yet, thanks to her moving voice and the advantage of her age, my grandmother helped Ruby score the highest in this round. In the end, she even clinched first place in the singing competition. A faint smile touched the corners of my mouth. I listened as the host loudly announced the X segment of the singing competition. X is all about improv, and this improv segment is called Friends Family Sing-Along. There was no prior communication. None of the contestants knew about this segment. I could see Ruby was a bit flustered too. She wasn't sure who to ask to sing with her. She hadn't been with the family long, so she didn't know who among us could sing. I noticed her gaze drifting in my direction, almost as if by accident. Once again, her little scheme seemed to be aimed at me. I glanced discreetly toward my dad's seat in the audience. I've got to get Dad to come up and sing with me later. Grandma was such a great singer. He must have inherited her talent, and then some. Dad usually keeps to himself, but this time, I'm going to make sure he steals the show. He's going to love it. A triumphant smile instantly spread across Ruby's face. The host began the X segment performance, following the order of the number tags. I was originally scheduled to go right before Ruby, just as the host called my name. Just like in the previous life, Ruby snatched the microphone first, saying, "My sister says she needs a bit more rest, so I'll go ahead." "Summer, are you sure you want to let Ruby choose first?" The host was also aware of the history between Ruby and me. After all, our circles of friends and family are practically the same. We're sisters. If Ruby picks first, she'll definitely have the upper hand. In my past life, I never knew her true purpose for coming into our family. She played her part perfectly. I thought she genuinely wanted to be a part of us, believing that the sins of the previous generation shouldn't be paid for by the next. Besides, the confession to Ethan didn't happen until the next semester, so I never realized how petty Ruby could be. So, out of kindness, I let Ruby make her choice first. Later, I wasn't angry when she chose Grandma, nor was I upset when she won first place. I even offered my congratulations. Little did I know, my kindness was just a tool for her to manipulate me. But it's okay, justice will be served. What goes around comes around. Okay, I replied to the host. Let Ruby choose first. Ruby eagerly took the microphone and said to my dad, "Dad, I'd like you to sing with me." 9. Down in the audience, my dad's face completely changed. He can't sing at all. There's no way he would sing in front of all these people. My dad waved his hand, signaling that he wasn't willing. Ruby, however, thought my dad wanted to help me with the singing, so she immediately made her eyes well up with tears. She said with deep emotion, "Dad, I'm truly so grateful to be back in this family, with your love, grandmas, my sisters, and my brothers, these past 16 years. It's only since returning to your side that I've understood what family truly means, what happiness truly is. Dad, for this performance, I don't care about winning any big prize. To me, you are more important than any award. I just want to be able to sing a duet with you, to create a memory I'll cherish for the rest of my life. Dad, I love you." Ruby's heartfelt confession earned her a round of thunderous applause from the entire room. Because of that, my dad simply couldn't refuse any longer. After all, Ruby had gone that far. She didn't want any awards. She just wanted to sing with him and create a beautiful memory. But my dad is a company executive. He has his reputation to consider. If he gets on stage and sings off-key, it will only bring him shame. But at this point, there was no turning back. He had no choice but to grit his teeth and step up. The host handed the microphone to my dad. Ruby asked my dad sweetly, "Dad, what song are you going to sing?" My dad's face was a picture of utter displeasure. He had absolutely no desire to sing. "Mr. Ruby, what song would you like to sing?" the host also inquired, gritting his teeth. My dad chose a song called "The Eternal Sound of the Waves." Ruby chimed in with flattery, "Dad, you have such great taste. I love this song too." My dad couldn't even manage a smile. The staff member started the backing track. I could see my dad's hand trembling as he held the microphone. He listened to the backing track and then began to sing. He came in noticeably early on the very first line. Ruby was taken aback for a moment. She probably thought it was just nerves that caused the mistake. He sang several lines, and not a single one was on key. At first, the audience was quite expectant. Since both his daughters were such good singers, everyone just assumed the father would be too, but it turned out to be utterly painful to listen to. Ruby was utterly stunned. She stared at my dad in disbelief. Aside from the hint from my inner thoughts, she probably also assumed my dad could sing. Reality, however, was a harsh slap in the face. My father's confidence on stage just kept fading, his voice growing quieter and quieter. When he finished, his face was flushed with embarrassment. "You have to understand, all these years, my father had been widely respected for his professional success. He'd never been humiliated like this before." The host was at a loss for how to smooth things over, and after a few perfunctory remarks, he ushered my father off the stage. I was utterly mortified the moment I saw my father step off the stage. Ruby was also frozen on stage, unable to react. She must have been panicking inside too. After making my father lose face so spectacularly, he would surely dislike her even more. And so it was. The host called my name. I happily invited my grandma on stage to sing with me. The moment my grandma's voice filled the room, the entire audience was stunned. At that moment, all of us contestants backstage started whispering. I thought it was a genetic mutation, but it turns out the talent skipped a generation in Summer's family. Grandma's voice is on a completely different level from Dad's. He must be feeling even more awkward now. Honestly, Ruby, she knew her dad couldn't sing, yet she still put him on stage to make a fool of himself. If it were my dad, He'd have broken my legs. 10. Hearing the discussion, Ruby's expression turned absolutely grim. She glared at me with a venomous look. I immediately shot back a look of my own. So Dad doesn't sing because he's actually bad at it. I always thought he was just too shy to start. Grandma sings so well. How come Dad can't? That's really strange. Phew, thank goodness Ruby asked Dad first. Otherwise, I would have been the one making a complete fool of myself. I could see Ruby's face contort with anger. Besides preventing her from suspecting I was messing with her, I was also deliberately trying to get under her skin with my words. Serves her right, the singing competition is over. With my grandma's help as a duet partner, I managed to clinch first place. Ruby looked at me with a gaze that could kill. She had been hoping to win first place to finally hold her head high at home, never expecting I'd swoop in and snatch such a big prize. In the car on the way home, I kept complimenting my grandma, telling her she's still got it, and that all my schoolmates have become her fans. The more I said it, the happier Grandma got, and the darker Dad's expression became. Naturally, Ruby's expression soured even more. After we got out of the car, Ruby tried to suck up to my dad, but he didn't even give her a glance and just strode off. Ruby clenched her teeth. I pretended to console her with feigned kindness. No one in our entire family could ever get my dad to perform on stage, but you managed it. It proves you're special in his eyes. Ruby's face twisted with anger. Of course she knew. My dad refused to go on stage to avoid embarrassment, and she had just made him humiliate himself in front of all those people. I gave Ruby a big smile and went back to my room. The moment I closed the door, I heard Ruby's shriek of utter despair. A smirk played on my lips. Can't handle it already. The best is yet to come. For a long time after that, Ruby was on her best behavior at home, going out of her way to be attentive and ingratiating, especially towards my dad, but obviously, my dad was giving her the cold shoulder. I reckon that being forced to sing on stage in front of thousands of people will haunt my father for the rest of his life. Nowadays, whenever someone brings up singing, my dad's face darkens. This knot, I'm afraid, will never be untied. My younger brother's 6th birthday was a lively affair at home. My little brother invited a few of his kindergarten friends over to celebrate his birthday with him. My grandma and dad also invited some relatives over to celebrate my brother's birthday. I noticed Ruby was really putting herself out there the whole time. One minute she was playing with the younger kids, the next she was chatting with the relatives, looking sweet and well-behaved. So, how are Ruby's grades? My aunt asked her out of the blue. Ruby looked a bit embarrassed. Her grades have never been good. She's always been at the very bottom of the class. With her eyes downcast, she said in a pitiful voice, I used to get really good grades at my old school. I just never expected everyone here to be so brilliant. No matter how hard I study, I just can't seem to catch up. The truth is, she hasn't been putting her mind to her studies at all. Looking at Ruby, my aunt was also somewhat moved. The educational standards are different, she said. It's only natural there would be a big gap in performance. Don't worry, Auntie, Ruby said with determination. I'll give it my all. I won't let the Xia family down. Auntie nodded. She felt a deep sense of relief and pride. I noticed a hint of smug satisfaction return to Ruby's face. Her eyes darted with a mischievous glint, as if she were hatching another scheme. 11. At this moment, a servant from the household stepped forward and said respectfully, the young master's cake has arrived. Has the cake arrived? I want cake, my younger brother said excitedly. My brother's little friend couldn't hold back either. Cake, I'll take care of it, Ruby quickly volunteered. She then led the group of children off to the side. Watching Ruby, my aunt said to my grandma, Ruby doesn't seem as thoughtless as you and my brother made her out to be. She actually seems quite perceptive, my grandma said with annoyance. She's always causing some kind of trouble. I don't hold out much hope for her. I just want her to stay out of mischief. I actually think she's quite well behaved. Just then, Ruby called out from one side of the hall, Grandma, Auntie, come over and help blow out the candles on the birthday cake for your grandson. My grandma, my aunt, and the rest of the family had all arrived. I got there too. Everyone sang, Happy Birthday, to my brother. Ruby was also very enthusiastic about serving everyone cake. My brother was the guest of honor today, so of course he got the first slice. Then, for the other kids, Ruby went on to serve a piece of cake to every elder. Her performance today really stole the show in front of all our relatives. hearing a relative praise her. She even shot me a smug look, her eyes practically gloating with triumph. In my past life, on my brother's birthday, she used the same method to win endless praise from our relatives. The final straw that allowed her to completely supplant me in this family and crush me utterly was this very birthday cake for my brother. Ruby, having read my mind, knew my brother was allergic to mangoes, so, in the strawberry cake I had prepared for him, she secretly swapped it for a mango cake. It was only after my brother had finished eating that the adults realized it was a mango cake. My little brother had already broken out in countless small bumps all over his body. He was rushed to the hospital and put on an 4-drip for several days. My grandma, my dad, and all the relatives nearly tore me a new one. No matter how I tried to explain, nobody would believe me. Now, it was finally Ruby's turn. It's a bit unethical towards my brother, I admit, but in my past life, he was bought off by Ruby and helped her target me, so, a little hardship in this life is exactly what he deserves. Everyone at home was eating cake. As they ate, my grandma's expression visibly changed. She turned to Ruby and asked, "Did you buy the cake?" "Yes, Grandma, I ordered it myself from the best bakery," Ruby said eagerly, looking for praise. "I made sure to ask for fresh whipped cream and fruit." She was just waiting for the compliment. "Is this mango cake?" My grandma's voice trembled slightly. "That's right, mango cake. I even went to a special import store to get the best mangoes. Do you like it?" "Grandma," Ruby asked sweetly. My grandma's face flushed red with anger, so agitated she was practically speechless. Ruby stared at my grandma, utterly bewildered. At that moment, I saw my grandma hurry over to my little brother, watching as he finished off a huge slice of cake. "How could you eat mango?" my grandma asked my brother. My brother was startled by the look on her face. He burst into tears with a loud wail. My dad was having tea with the elders in the tea room and hurried out when he heard the commotion. "What's going on? What's going on? Your precious daughter, that wonderful daughter of yours, Ruby, the one you brought home. She gave Leo a mango cake." My grandma was absolutely furious, beside herself with anger. "What?" My dad's face changed, and he shouted at Ruby, "Are you out of your mind? Don't you know he's allergic to mangoes?" Ruby was completely stunned by the fury of my dad and my grandma. My little brother was also screaming at that moment. It itches so much." As he said that, he lifted his shirt, revealing a dense cluster of small bumps all over his stomach. My dad took one look and, without a word, scooped up my brother, saying, "To the hospital, now." My grandma hurriedly followed after them. She even turned back to yell at Ruby, "If anything happens to Leo, you'll pay for it." 12. Hospital. My brother was rushed into the emergency room. My grandmother was crying non-stop in the hallway. My father was so frantic he kept pacing back and forth. All our relatives were beside themselves with worry. Ruby was clearly terrified, too. Her face was pale, and her whole body was trembling. She was also afraid she had really caused a disaster. After a while, my brother was wheeled out. "Doctor, how is he? How's my son?" my father asked anxiously. The doctor said, "Fortunately, you brought him in time. He's stable for now, but he'll need an 4-drip for a few days. Go ahead and get him admitted." "Thank you, doctor," my father said gratefully. My grandmother also kept expressing her thanks. "Parents, you must understand, allergies are no trivial matter. In severe cases, they can be fatal." My grandma was absolutely terrified when she heard it could be deadly. After the doctor left, my younger brother was also taken to a hospital room. I just got my brother settled in. My grandmother suddenly slapped Ruby hard across the face. "You jinx, are you trying to kill my grandson? I never should have let you into this family. You're the child of a mistress, a disgrace to our name." My grandmother's words were vicious, but not a single person in the entire hospital room spoke up for Ruby. Just like I was in my past life, my grandma and dad tore into me, calling me cruel-hearted, while Ruby fanned the flames from the sidelines. "No, Grandma, let me explain. I didn't know Leo was allergic to mangoes. I really didn't, and it was my sister who said Leo loves mango cake the most." Ruby pointed the finger directly at me. Everyone was staring at me. I looked at Ruby with wide, innocent eyes. Before I could even explain, my grandma lashed out. "How dare you try to pin this on Summer, when Leo had that mango allergy scare? It was Summer who spotted it first and rushed him to the hospital. He's only fine because of her." There's no way she'd ever give him mango, but Ruby was at a loss for words. No one would believe her. I don't want to see you, get out of this house. My grandmother didn't want to hear Ruby's excuses, nor did she want to lay eyes on her again. You take her away from here. I don't care where. Just get her out of my sight. Grandma, get out. My grandmother shrieked hysterically. My father, also furious, grabbed Ruby and dragged her out of the hospital room. Watching Ruby's disheveled state, a sense of vengeful satisfaction finally washed over me. I had finally paid back every bit of suffering I endured in my past life. I thought Ruby would be driven out of the Xia family for good, cutting all ties with us. Yet, when we returned to the villa, Ruby's figure was still there. My grandma almost had a heart attack. My dad explained, Ruby says she knows she was wrong. And just because she knows she was wrong, you forgive her? My grandma asked angrily. No matter what, Ruby is my daughter, and I want to give her one last chance. My dad said somewhat helplessly. I have no idea what Ruby did to my dad to make him still give her a break. Come to think of it, Ruby would do absolutely anything to get her way, probably pulled all the classic manipulative stunts. You've already given her plenty of chances, my dad suddenly said. Ruby says if she can make it into the top 10 of her grade on the final exams, then we should agree to let her stay. Top 10, my grandma sneered with utter sarcasm. She's ranked over 1,000 in the whole school. She thinks she can make top 10. Is she dreaming? That's exactly why I agreed, my dad said. Then she won't have any excuse to keep mooching off us and refusing to leave. My grandma thought about it and reluctantly agreed. If she doesn't make it, she gets out immediately. I don't ever want to see her again. 13. Did you hear that, Ruby? My dad called out to Ruby. I heard you. If I don't get in, I'll leave on my own. No need for you or grandma to remind me. I wouldn't have the face to stay in this house anyway, Ruby promised. You'd better mean what you say. My grandma dropped a line and walked off. My dad didn't want to deal with Ruby either, and he left too. I was the only one left standing in the hall. Ruby didn't bother hiding the look in her eyes anymore. She confronted me. Summer, did you do that on purpose? What do you mean, on purpose? I asked with an innocent look. I acted as if I had no idea what she was talking about. Leo can't eat mango cake. Why would you say it's his favorite? I never said that, I replied, completely baffled. Ruby glared at me fiercely. I knew she was suspicious of me, but she didn't dare to confront me directly. She still wanted to use me. I admitted frankly, but it's true that Leo really loves mango cake. He's ended up in the hospital twice from sneaking it, I added, but liking it is one thing. He just can't eat it. Ruby was so furious she could practically taste blood. She was probably a little angry with herself, too. She must have thought she'd misread my mind. After all, what I was really thinking at the time was just that Leo loves mango cake the most. But I never said I'd buy her a mango cake. Ruby gritted her teeth so hard they nearly shattered. Fuming, she turned and stormed off. The final exams are in 2 months. I have no idea how Ruby managed to get into the top 10 of the whole school in just 2 months. You have to understand, I've been working my tail off since I was a kid, constantly in tutoring, and I only just barely scraped into the top 10. I figured it out later, during the exam. She was reading my mind. She used to not care about her studies. In fact, to get Ethan's attention, she deliberately sabotaged her own performance, half-heartedly answering questions on tests, which resulted in consistently poor grades. However, in the recent monthly exams and pop quizzes, she's been scoring quite well. Her improvement has been nothing short of remarkable. I once compared my test paper with Ruby's and realized we made almost exactly the same mistakes. Of course, she was quite clever about it. She didn't just copy my answers word for word. To avoid raising suspicion, she improved her grades gradually. For example, she might move up 100 places in one exam, and then 200 in the next. Eventually, even the teachers started praising her in class. Her classmates were all quite surprised, never expecting Ruby to improve so quickly. The key thing is, no one usually sees her putting in much effort. She just doesn't mess around as much as before. Ruby started getting smug again, every now and then. She'd even throw in a few deliberately snide remarks. Studying requires intelligence too. Just cramming mindlessly will only turn you into a bookworm. Anyway, whenever I decide to apply myself, I can get great grades. Those remarks were clearly aimed at me. I was the hardest worker in the whole class. I used to do it for Ethan, but now I do it for myself, given a second chance at life. I understand what truly matters. In the final 2 months of the semester, Ruby was thriving in class. With the teacher's constant praise, her classmates began to see her in a new light, and Ethan also started to take notice of Ruby. While there was no clear affection, he no longer kept his distance from her. Occasionally, when Ruby took the initiative to ask Ethan for help with a problem, he would patiently explain it to her. Every time this happens, she looks at me with a challenging glare. She thinks I still have feelings for Ethan. Give me a break. Only a fool would go back to their ex. 14. The final exams arrived right on schedule. Ruby was brimming with confidence. She even went around telling everyone she was determined to rank in the top 10 of the entire school this semester. She might have been laughed at before, but this time, everyone believed she could succeed. They were even looking forward to witnessing a miracle. On the day of the exam, I worked through the problems with quiet focus, finishing them quickly. After the exam, Ruby went around telling everyone how easy the test was. If the teacher had allowed it, she would have turned in her paper early. 1 week later, all the students returned to school to collect their final grades. Every year, the school honors the top 10 students in front of the entire school. All the students sat in the audience, waiting for the final award ceremony at the end of term assembly. Ruby, you must be in the top 10, right? A classmate whispered to her. I don't know. But the questions all seemed pretty easy, Ruby said dismissively. I'm so jealous. You just have to study and your grades are great. No matter how hard I try, my scores just won't go up, a classmate said enviously. Another classmate quickly chimed in. My mom even told me to ask what you usually eat. She wants to supplement my brain with it. Ruby was basking in the praise. The principal began announcing the list of the top 10 students in the school. All the students were feeling a bit nervous. Ruby wasn't as composed as she was trying to appear. After all, whether she makes it into the top 10 is partly up to me. The names were announced one by one. The top 3 were called, and neither my name nor Ruby's was among them. Ruby, don't tell me you're in the top 3 for the whole school, a classmate exclaimed in surprise. Ruby said nothing. I could tell she was starting to panic, but she probably thought, since my name wasn't called, maybe I really did make the top 3. If she made it to the top 3, she'd truly make a name for herself. The principal announced the third-place winner. There was no me, and no Ruby either. The principal announced the second-place winner, Ethan. Ethan had always been in first place before. This time, he dropped to second place and was visibly upset. Some classmates started jeering. No way, Ruby actually beat Ethan. In just 2 months, she caught up and passed him. She's seriously amazing. Ethan also turned his head to look at Ruby. Her eyes were filled with unwillingness, yet, it was clear she had gained a new level of respect for Ruby. Ruby clenched her teeth, not daring to respond in the slightest. Holding the list of top students, the principal looked it over and said with satisfaction, this year's school-wide first place is a girl. The whole class had their eyes locked on Ruby, but I could see Ruby was absolutely freaking out. After all, she plagiarized my work. If I didn't even make the top 10, how could she possibly get first place? The next moment, we heard the principal call out loudly, Summer, congratulations, Ruby. Her classmate began, about to share in her joy. The words were left unfinished. The entire class froze. What? Summer, isn't it Ruby? The eyes of the entire class snapped back to me in unison, filled with disbelief. My usual grades are pretty good, to be fair, but coming in first place, and beating Ethan by such a wide margin, was still a real shocker. After all, everyone just assumed Ruby was a natural genius. No one would have noticed just how hard I was working during that period. 15. I rose to my feet with a smile and went up to the stage to receive the award. I saw Ruby's face contort with emotion. She couldn't fathom how I had come in first, while she hadn't even cracked the top 10. A classmate tried to console her, saying, maybe you just had an off day, you could be 11th, 12th. That's still really impressive. Ruby endured it. She kept on enduring. After the school-wide assembly, the students returned to their classrooms to collect their report cards. The homeroom teacher lavished praise on me from the podium, then said with a cold expression, the top student in the entire school is in our class, and the very bottom student in the entire school is also in our class. The whole class erupted in an uproar. Our class has the highest average score in the entire grade. In all my years of teaching, I've never seen such an outrageous exam paper. How on earth did she manage to avoid every single correct answer? A 750-point test, and she only scored 60. That's an average of 10 points per subject. The homeroom teacher grew angrier with each word. Ruby, care to explain how you pulled that off? The entire class was stunned upon hearing the name Ruby. Everyone turned to look at Ruby. Impossible, Ruby exclaimed, her voice filled with disbelief. There's no way I only scored 60, no way. I always get at least 700 or more. I scored 710. Ruby was convinced that even if she did a bit worse, she'd still have at least 700 points. See for yourself, the homeroom teacher said, handing Ruby the original exam paper and answer sheet. Ruby quickly took them. It really is her exam paper. How could these be wrong? Ruby demanded of the homeroom teacher. How do you explain these mistakes? Could the machine have misread it? So, how would you solve this problem? The homeroom teacher asked Ruby, pointing to a random question. Ruby was put on the spot. In fact, it wasn't just Ruby who was skeptical. When the homeroom teacher received the report card and the test paper, she couldn't believe it either and thought there must have been a mix-up. It's possible Ruby misaligned her answers when filling out the answer sheet. Come up to the front and solve this problem step by step for the class, the homeroom teacher urged. Ruby had no idea how to do it. She only knew the answers because she'd been listening to my thoughts during the exam. She stared blankly at the blackboard, then glanced back at me. I looked at her with a completely serious expression, giving nothing away. You don't know, the homeroom teacher frowned. Ruby was speechless. What about this one? The homeroom teacher asked again. Ruby still couldn't figure it out. Ruby, how did you manage your usual grades? Cheating? This question is so simple it's practically handing you points, and you still can't do it. The homeroom teacher was furious. I even argued with the school administration over your grades, insisting there must have been a mistake. Now I see I was just making a fool of myself. With grades like yours, you can expect to be expelled. The homeroom teacher didn't waste another word on Ruby and sent her back to her seat. Naturally, jeers and mocking voices began to rise from the crowd. Hilarious. So she was cheating all along. I knew her progress was too good to be true. I actually thought she was some kind of prodigy. How can she even show her face with that smug look she always puts on? If I were her, I'd just jump off a building right now. This is beyond humiliating. Summer came in first, and Ruby came in dead last. You could say the Xia family's ancestral graves are either smoking with good fortune or have been thoroughly defiled. 16. Ruby was mocked mercilessly. The homeroom teacher didn't waste much time. After handing out the report cards, assigning homework, and going over the holiday guidelines, she dismissed the class. At the school gate, I was just about to get in the car and head home. Ethan suddenly called out to me, Summer. I turned to look at him. So, what are your plans for the break? Ethan asked me. A lot of other students were around, and they were all watching us. Ethan is really popular at our school. Way too many people have a crush on him. This was the first time he had ever initiated a conversation with a girl. What's up? If you don't mind, we could study together over the break. I do mind, I said, turning him down flat. All eyes were on me, wide with shock. Even Ethan was staring at me in disbelief. He was always the one doing the rejecting. Being turned down was a completely new experience for him. I'm sorry, I prefer to study alone. I tossed out a remark and walked away without a second glance. I had just stepped through the front door. Ruby showed up right behind me. Naturally, my family was already aware of my school grades. Got anything else to say? My dad asked Ruby. My grandma was even more openly scornful towards Ruby. Weren't you aiming for the top 10 in the whole school? And what happened? You ended up dead last. The school even called to have you expelled. You've completely humiliated our Xia family. Thankfully, Summer is obedient. She got first place in the whole school, saving our family's face. Ruby sobbed. Grandma, Dad, please give me another chance. It was an accident. I swear I'll never do it again. My father didn't waste another word on Ruby. He simply threw her luggage down in front of her. Dad, I'm your own daughter. How can you bear to make me sleep on the streets? Ruby pleaded. Putting on a pitiful act. My only real daughter is Summer, my father said coldly. Get out of my sight this instant, or I'll have you thrown out. Grandma, get out. My grandmother didn't have a single good thing to say about Ruby. Ruby kept on crying and refused to leave. My grandma and my dad had lost their patience and went straight upstairs. Before heading up, one of them ordered, "Give her 10 minutes. If she's not gone by then, throw her out." Ruby was utterly devastated. She couldn't understand how things had ended up this way, until her gaze fell upon me. Seeing the smile on my lips, she seemed to suddenly understand. "Summer, was it you? Have you been the one sabotaging me all along?" Ruby glared at me with a vicious expression. "What did I ever do to you?" I said innocently. "Why did you get first place while I got last? You did it on purpose, didn't you? It was all you, Summer." The more Ruby spoke, the clearer it became to her. "You said Grandma doesn't like girls who do housework, but what Grandma really can't stand are lazy good-for-nothings. You said Ethan likes bad girls, but Ethan likes girls with good grades. You said Dad could sing, but it turns out he's tone deaf. You said Leo loves mango cake, but he's allergic to mangoes. During the exam, you said the answer was A, but you ended up choosing C." Ruby finally understood. "You know I can read minds," Ruby screamed. The sudden realization that I had been toying with them sent them into a complete, frenzied madness. Her eyes were bloodshot, her expression twisted into the most terrifying snarl. "I'll kill you, Summer, I'm going to kill you." 17. There's no way Ruby could kill me. She didn't even get close to me before the servants threw her out. No matter how much she raged or made a scene, no one would open the door for her. But she didn't give up. 2 weeks later, Ruby called me, saying she wanted to apologize to me in person. She said that after apologizing, she was going to Shenzhen to work. She said she just wanted to see me one last time. I know perfectly well, she doesn't want to see me, she wants to kill me, just like in my last life. She believes that by killing me, she can completely usurp my position. As long as I'm gone, the Xia family will accept her. I accepted the invitation and went. It was the same rooftop from my previous life. It had only been half a month. Ruby had changed a great deal. Stripped of his fine clothes, he looked disheveled and utterly haggard. She said, "To please my stepfather, my mother actually made me. She made me." Ruby couldn't go on, looking completely shattered. I said coldly, "That's your mother's fault. Coming to me is useless. If you just let me come back to the Xia family, I won't have to put up with my mother's treatment anymore." "Ruby, you're 17, you have 2 hands and 2 feet. Do you really need to rely on your mother to survive? You're 17 too. Why do you still need the Xia family to support you? What gives you the right?" Ruby challenged me. "We're both our father's daughters. Why am I the one being treated differently?" "Because you're the illegitimate daughter. That's not my fault either. So my dad gave you a chance to come back, and you blew it," I said mockingly. "If you hadn't schemed against me, would Dad and Grandma have turned against me?" Ruby grew increasingly agitated. "If you hadn't tried to replace me and become the Xia family's only daughter, why would I have schemed against you?" I retorted. Ruby froze. She never expected I'd know what she was thinking. "You can read minds too. What do you think?" I sneered. "Humph." Ruby seemed to have had enough of this. "I don't care what you have. You're dead today. Once you're gone, I refuse to believe father and grandmother won't accept me." As the words hung in the air, Ruby mustered all her strength and shoved me right off the rooftop. In that moment of falling, I saw Ruby's face, wearing the same triumphant and cruel smile as in my past life. Not this time. No such luck. When I fell, I landed on a safety airbag that had been prepared in advance. And Ruby's criminal act against me was all captured on camera, which I had installed beforehand. I handed the video over to the police. Ruby was sentenced to life imprisonment for attempted murder under aggravated circumstances. Ruby was led away from the courtroom. From a distance, I sent her my thoughts. "Congratulations, you're in for life. Heaven's wrath can be avoided, but the doom you bring upon yourself is inescapable. Goodbye, see you in the next life." I watched as Ruby, handcuffed, fought like a wild animal, desperate to take me down with her, only to be brutally restrained by the prison guards, rendered completely immobile. Absolutely. What a sweet victory. I walked out of the courtroom and took a deep breath of fresh air. Given a second chance at life, I didn't make Ruby pay with her life. But living like this must be a fate worse than death. And my wonderful life, it's only just beginning. The end. Story 2. Michael crashed heavily into the surging mass of zombies, and in an instant, his figure disappeared from sight. I stared at Yusu in disbelief. Behind him, a dense horde of zombies rushed towards him, but he didn't look back. He helped me up, his movements rough yet swift, and somehow managed not to cause any further damage to my wound. He bent down and carried me on his back, then lifted me high and pushed me towards the cabin door. "Quick, catch her," he roared at Jianzhe. And I even suspected that he might spit out blood foam the next second. "Yusu," I desperately wanted to stop him. But my voice was barely audible. I was completely exhausted, able only to lean weakly against his back. Jianzhe's strong hand grabbed my arm. "I've got her." His voice lacked its usual elegance. The pilot up front kept issuing urgent cries for us to hurry. Yusu and I were almost engulfed by the tide of zombies, yet he used his tall frame to push me upward with all his might, ignoring the bites and gnaws on his body. His warm body heat seeped through his clothes and into mine. Jianzhe and Su Ran pulled together, finally dragging half of my body into the plane. My foot rested on Yusu's back. He held my foot with both hands. I looked down. Half of his body was already submerged in the zombie horde, covered in blood, but he still looked up at me. As the sky grew lighter, his eyes were filled with only my figure. Finally, I was pulled onto the plane by Jianzhe. The plane slowly took off, kicking up clouds of dust and a strong wind. I leaned against the cabin railing. That blood-soaked figure still stood firm, maintaining an upward posture. I could almost still see those bright eyes. The plane flew towards the horizon, getting farther and farther away, until that figure was completely swallowed by the surging tide and vanished from sight. It felt like water droplets landed on the back of my hand. When I looked up, I realized I was already in tears. In the distance, the golden sun slowly rose, illuminating the desolate land. The night receded, and the dawn was finally here. Epilogue. Yusu had known her for a long time. The first time he saw her was during the club recruitment. She was with Su Ran, and they seemed to glow under the sun. Strangely, he couldn't tear his eyes away. The slight annoyance he felt at being dragged in by senior girls to serve as eye candy disappeared instantly. He even felt a hint of excitement. However, to his disappointment, she casually took the flyer handed by the senior and didn't give it a second look. It seemed she wasn't very interested in their club. Yusu watched as she stopped in front of the calligraphy club where Jianzhe was. He saw her chatting animatedly with Jianzhe, as if there was no one else in her eyes. That initial disappointment quickly turned into a pang of discomfort. It was like a gentle sting from a bee, leaving a mark in his heart. Yusu couldn't help but keep his eyes on her. Whenever she was around, his gaze would fixate on her, like a dragon coveting a precious treasure. His eyes held a longing that he himself wasn't fully aware of, yet he hesitated to approach, afraid that his presence might disrupt her life. Yusu, who was always straightforward and hot-tempered, for the first time felt such confusion and distress. When the virus broke out, he followed her all the way to the library, taking out the zombies that tried to get close to her along the way. To his surprise, she waved at him, even though they were in the midst of a hellish situation. The moment he saw her, it felt like he was in a peaceful haven. He deliberately said harsh things, acting like a child, using the most clumsy ways to catch her attention. In fact, he didn't really care about rescuing others or opening the door. As long as she was safe, nothing else mattered to him. Or perhaps, it wouldn't be so bad if they died together. There was a dark, secret hope in his heart. When the rescued guy with yellow hair looked at her with a disgusting gaze, anger welled up in Yusu. No, it wasn't the right time yet. He struggled to suppress his anger. When they were about to leave, she called out loudly for him to hurry and close the windows. Yusu responded while opening the window a crack and throwing his phone out. Then he turned and left without hesitation. On the way, he saw her running in the opposite direction alone to draw the zombies' attention. He instinctively wanted to chase after her, but someone was faster. Damn it, Yusu thought expressionlessly. This guy was as annoying as ever, no matter the situation. To ensure she could reach the supermarket safely, Yusu volunteered to go out and lure the zombies away. He secretly hoped that she would return safely while that pretty boy Jianzhe would die out there. He felt a glimmer of anticipation. When he came back and saw the supermarket door surrounded by zombies, Yusu was indeed stunned. But then, she stood upstairs and waved at him, shouting at him anxiously. In that moment, he couldn't make out what she was saying. His body moved before his mind, and he was already running towards her. As he climbed up the rope, he felt something brush against his foot. After getting into the supermarket, he secretly checked and found a bite mark. Although it was shallow, it was clearly a bite mark, with blood slowly seeping out. Yusu calmly wiped it away with a tissue and then acted as if nothing had happened. Perhaps dying together with her was really a good choice, he thought again, but when the time came, he would definitely be the first to bite Jianzhe, ruin that face that attracted so much attention. He felt his body gradually changing. But he still didn't say a word. He heard that she decided to go to the bell tower for rescue because of Su Ran. If I were the one injured, would you take such a risk for me? He wondered blankly, feeling a mix of grievance and reluctance. When she parted ways with the others at the bell tower, Yusu, who had been keeping a close eye on her, immediately chased after her. This time, he was finally faster than that pretty boy. He heard what she said in the broadcasting room. The dawn will eventually come. In that moment, he suddenly understood her unwavering perseverance. He did his best to hold her feet from below, pushing her towards the plane. Only 3 people can get on. Oh, so only 3 people could board. He thought indifferently, it definitely wouldn't be him anyway. He might as well pull Jianzhe down. He looked up and saw that Jianzhe was at the far end, making it difficult to act. TSK, what a pity. Suddenly, she fell heavily to the ground. And blood started to seep from her calf. In an instant, it felt like his brain had been slammed with a heavy hammer. He roughly grabbed Michael. A violent impulse surged through his veins, making him want to tear the guy apart. This scum, how dare he? He desperately suppressed his bloodthirsty urge, ignoring Michael's cries, and threw him into the oncoming horde of zombies. What the hell is this? Countless zombies gnawed at his flesh. He could barely feel his lower body anymore. Not until more than half of her body was finally on the plane did he lift her foot up again. A zombie bit into his neck, tearing off a large piece of flesh, but he didn't care. How strange, he thought. He had never been someone who cared about others' lives. Initially, he wanted to board the plane with her, spend the remaining time together, and then hold her as they fell from the plane. Yet the moment he saw her fall, his instinct was to get her onto the plane and to tear apart the person who pulled her down. So, I want her to live, he realized. The plane took off, and her figure gradually disappeared on the horizon. Yusu still maintained that posture, looking up until the morning sun shone into his eyes. With a hint of regret, he closed his eyes and fell into eternal sleep in the darkness. So, I wanted you to live. Your survival is my reason to keep going. Michael made some simple sandwiches that didn't have a strong smell. And we had dinner with warm water. Leo fell asleep soon after. As night fell, Samuel's calls came one after another. Knowing the laziness and greed of Samuel's family, I picked up the phone quickly. I was eager to find out how they would survive the apocalypse this time since I hadn't stockpiled supplies. Savannah, where the hell did you take the child? Quickly restore my mother's and the others' bank cards. They're trapped on the island and can't get back. If you're still alive, come back quickly. Go to the supermarket and grab more rice. I like the long, grained fragrant rice from northeast China. I won't eat anything else. Even at this time, he was still making demands of me. I smiled, pretending to be panicked, and said, "Honey, I'm trapped in the mall restroom. Come and save me quickly." As soon as Samuel realized I was of no use, he hung up the phone immediately. I knew it would be like this. Michael looked at me with pity. I waved my hand, indicating that I had been through it once and it didn't matter anymore. After a quick wash, Michael and I divided the rooms. He gave the sunny master bedroom of the villa to me and Leo and lived in the next room, perhaps because I was fully prepared this time. Looking at Leo's sleeping face, I fell asleep quickly. In the middle of the night, I dreamt that I was hugging Leo again in that dark and lightless basement, day after day. Without a drop of water, my body functions were gradually failing. I even encouraged Leo to bite my flesh to survive, but Leo just shook his head weakly and slowly died in my arms. The roars of the vampires outside the basement made me feel suffocated, but all I could do was close my eyes while holding Leo. When it was dawn, I saw Michael lying in front of my bed, looking at me with worry. "I heard you calling for help." I lowered my head and said, "I'm fine. The last life was in the past, and I should have a new life on the second day of the apocalypse." For breakfast, we simply cooked some rice porridge and pickled vegetables. To avoid trouble, I even turned on the exhaust fan at full speed when frying eggs to prevent the smell from spreading, since there was still water and electricity. As a precaution, I filled all the containers in Michael's house that could hold water and replaced and used them on time every day. I also planted vegetable seeds such as eggplants, green vegetables, bean sprouts, tomatoes, green onions, and garlic in the yard and took good care of them every day, waiting for them to sprout. Just as I was turning over the flower soil, there were crashing sounds from outside the courtyard wall. Through the gaps in the iron sheet, I saw those green-faced zombies lurking in the shadows, peeking at me. 8. Zombies were afraid of light, so during the day, they would hide in shaded places and attack humans. Taoist priests also knew the weakness of these zombies, after pasting talismans on them. They would use mirrors to continuously reflect sunlight onto the zombies, eliminating as many as possible. I quickly moved a mirror from the house and reflected the sunlight towards those zombies. The zombies shrieked and dodged, and soon smoke rose from their bodies. However, due to the obstruction of the iron sheet, the effect wasn't very obvious. I reinforced the iron sheet with iron wire. While testing its firmness, there were footsteps outside the southern courtyard wall. Someone was coming, and they were right outside the wall. I crouched and moved towards the blind spot. I saw that when those people didn't find what they wanted, they left quickly. It was still too dangerous. The apocalypse tested human nature the most. There were always some bold and reckless people who did things they wouldn't dare to do in normal times and then framed the zombies. They would kill people and throw the bodies into the zombie horde, knock people unconscious and throw them downstairs to pretend it was a suicide. And when there was no food, they would start eating people. I had experienced all this in my last life. This time, they didn't find the supplies. But it might be different when those seeds sprouted. I quickly went back to the villa and discussed with Michael about cutting down some furniture to block the gaps in the courtyard wall and ensure that people outside couldn't see inside. Michael also dragged out a lot of pulsed electronic fences from the garage. Seeing my teasing expression, Michael explained, "What, as a single and good-natured man, shouldn't I be on guard?" Michael and I worked together to reinforce the courtyard wall. Now, the entire villa was as secure as a fortress. Neither the mindless zombies nor the people with ulterior motives could get close. Relieved, I cooked a meal of multigrain rice and stewed the carrot and beef that Leo liked. The three of us had 2 peaceful meals. As evening fell, the day was coming to an end. 9. After I put Leo to sleep, there were crashing sounds outside the courtyard wall again. Michael looked over from the second floor with a serious expression. "It's Patrick and his secretary Ruby. They've both become zombies. Their faces were green, their eyes were yellow, brown, and their once beautiful faces were full of wrinkles. These were the signs of their bodies hardening and losing fat after becoming zombies. I had warned them before, but no one would believe it until the apocalypse came. We retreated from the second-floor window to the room. It was hard to accept seeing the living people around us being assimilated into zombies in a short time, and we couldn't fall asleep. I believed Michael felt the same way. On the second day of the apocalypse, when we looked from the second floor at dawn, the entire neighborhood was filled with dense zombies, and those 2 people had already blended into the zombie horde and disappeared. I got in touch with my parents by phone. They said that quarantine points had been set up in Yangzhou, the government distributed supplies, and local Taoist temples dispersed the people in batches. A Taoist priest was stationed at each quarantine point, and there hadn't been any major casualties for the time being. Relieved, I made a few hand-held pancakes for breakfast. The news on TV was still rolling real-time reports on the situation in various places. When I opened my phone, various short video platforms were vigorously carrying out rescue efforts. Every day, some people sacrificed heroically, but there were also those who tried to gain attention, risking their lives for traffic and playing the game of surviving the apocalypse. They walked in the sun, streamed the zombies hiding in the shade on their phones, and mocked that there was nothing to be afraid of. But as soon as a cloud blocked the sun, this person was pounced on by the zombies and torn to pieces. The live stream showed the scene of his blood and flesh flying everywhere, and then the video was forcibly closed by the platform. The city had started to organize apocalypse response procedures in an orderly manner. High tech weapons were used to kill zombies during the day, and people rested at night to avoid casualties. This could only maintain the current situation. Leo hugged my leg sadly. Mom, when can I go to kindergarten again? I want to play with my friends. I stroked Leo's head and comforted him. It won't be long, Leo, be brave. Brave people will eventually defeat the bad guys and make our lives return to normal. Leo nodded. Then I want to be a brave superhero. I played with Leo for a while and put him to sleep. Samuel didn't call again. Most likely, he had already moved in with his female neighbor. That was just the way he was. He always asked me to tolerate his mother and sister, but when there was danger, he would always take care of himself first. In the end, he was just an extremely selfish person. 10. On the seventh day of the apocalypse, near dusk, I went to the room to wake Leo up for dinner, but I found that Leo was gone. My heart skipped a beat, and a sense of foreboding overwhelmed me. I quickly shouted Leo's name all over the house. The large villa echoed with my voice, but there was no response. When I ran to the yard, I found that the gate of the courtyard wall was open. Leo's body was already halfway out. I rushed up to pull Leo back and found that some strangers were coaxing Leo to come out with cookies. At this time, Michael also rushed out and shouted, "Matthew, this is my son." That Matthew was so thin that he was almost a skeleton. He looked up at Michael and smiled eerily. "So this is your kid? How come you got married and had a child without making a sound? I didn't even see you share any wedding candies." Look at his chubby face. "You've been living well recently." Michael smiled honestly. "My wife and child don't like going out much. I'm sorry for that. We've been rationing water recently. After this wave of zombies passes, I'll definitely come to your place with wedding candies to apologize." Matthew just kept smiling and didn't say a word, standing still at the gate. The old woman behind him was impatient. She grabbed Leo's hand and screamed, trying to drag him away. At a time like this, who cares whose kid it is? We're almost starving to death. If we take him away, we can have meat to eat for a long time. I trembled as I held on to Leo. Dread to think what would have happened to Leo if I hadn't discovered it in time. The sun set, and the last ray of light disappeared. A large number of zombies appeared on the street again. Sensing the smell of humans, they quickly surrounded us. Michael picked up a baseball bat from the corner and swung it at Matthew and the others, but he was directly dragged out of the gate by the two old people. "We can survive longer with you." In the apocalypse, when people knew they were at the end, they could always unleash unimaginable strength. Michael quickly closed the courtyard gate and shouted, "Ivy, take care of yourself and the child. Don't come out." My mind was in a turmoil, and my limbs went weak as I wanted to open the door, but Leo was still by my side. Coming back to my senses, I dropped my hands. Even after living this life again, fate still played such a cruel joke on me. There were sounds of the baseball bat hitting outside the door. I nervously peeked through the cat eye. Even though the two old people were strong, they couldn't defeat a young man in his 20s or 30s. They were quickly defeated, bitten on the neck by the zombies, and assimilated into zombies. The other zombies also surrounded Michael. As Michael waved the baseball bat, he climbed up the gate. Although the zombies could jump, they were mindless and could only gather at Michael's feet, following the smell of humans. I quickly went back into the house, took out a ladder, turned off the pulsed electronic fence, and threw it down. Then I turned it on again to drive the zombies away. Then I opened a small gap and shouted at Michael, "Come in quickly." But Michael held the door tightly and said calmly, "Ivy, go back inside. Don't worry about me." Michael looked down, and blood was dripping continuously from the hand holding the baseball bat. With a mix of nervousness and unwillingness, I broke down. After living this life again, I even harmed him. I cried and leaned against the door. "Michael, I'm the one who got you into this." "Ivy, don't cry. You look better when you smile." Later, take the pulsed electric fence up and tie it properly. Don't open the door again. Just wait for news from the government. My bank cards are all in the hidden compartment of the study, the place where we used to hide things when we played games as kids. The password has always been your birthday and hasn't changed. When this is over, go to my lawyer, Wang Jiaming. Since I was 20, the beneficiary of my will has been you. Please take care of my company and my parents. It turned out that my Michael had never changed. I leaned weakly against the courtyard gate, and Leo started crying beside me, but my Michael stood there with a baseball bat, protecting us until the last moment. Time seemed to stand still. the zombies wanted to approach. Drawn by the smell of humans, but were held back by the electric fence. At this moment, I really wished I could live this life all over again. 10 minutes later, Michael was still holding the baseball bat up high. I suddenly felt something was wrong. When Matthew and his wife were bitten just now, they immediately turned into zombies and blended into the zombie horde. But what about Michael? I peeked through the cat eye at his wound again. It was still bright red. Looking at Matthew, the area around his neck was already dark green. Michael must have been scratched during the fight with Matthew. I quickly opened the courtyard gate and dragged Michael in. It's okay, Michael. The news said that after being bitten, the wound turns green. Your wound is clearly from being scratched during the fight with Matthew. Besides, you haven't turned into a zombie, and your blood is still red. Michael didn't say anything, but he nodded trustingly. I dragged Michael back to the living room of the villa, took out the first aid kit and bandages, and carefully bandaged his wound. Tears fell from my eyes onto the ground. Don't be afraid, Ivy. I've been very happy these past few days. In the past 6 years, I never dared to imagine that we would have such a life together. I choked up and said, "You're so silly, you've given me everything. What about your future wife and children? Aren't you afraid that I'll treat your parents badly? If you hadn't come to me, I wouldn't have a wife. We grew up together, and our parents know each other well. How could you treat my parents badly?" I hugged Michael tightly, never wanting to let go. 11. For dinner, I added a nourishing soup, and the three of us had a good meal. Worried that Leo was frightened during the day, I gave him a hot bath and put him to bed. Michael went to the garage early, made a makeshift bed, and surrounded it with the remaining cut wood, saying that if he turned into a zombie, he would set it on fire. If nothing happened, he would go back to the next door room to sleep the next day. I smiled and nodded, and the villa returned to silence. On the 8th day of the apocalypse, fortunately, everything was fine. I simply cooked some green beans, corn, and multigrain rice. Since the supplies of vegetables and other dietary fiber were decreasing, we had to rely on supplements to help with digestion. To survive the apocalypse in the long run, I picked up the garden trowel and walked towards the yard again. According to the situation, the first batch of seeds wouldn't sprout for at least 7 days. Michael followed me, helping me tend to the land in the yard. He even pulled out some precious flowers and plants to make more space for fruits and vegetables. Ivy, I've dreamt of this scene countless times. With you here, my insomnia is gone. I don't want to be passive anymore, Ivy. Let's be together, okay? I shook my head. Although Samuel is at fault, I don't want to make the same mistake. I can't live with myself if I do. I looked up at Michael. Trust me, once this zombie incident is over, everything will work out. Michael opened his mouth, but in the end, he lowered his head like a wounded puppy and didn't say anything. I patted him on the back. Come on, let's go back and take inventory of the supplies to see how long we can last. The storage room and the walk-in freezer were already filled by me, learning from the lessons of my last life. While ensuring Leo's nutrition, I chose foods with high-calorie content as much as possible, preparing for a long-term battle. If the water and electricity supply continued, we could probably last for 6 years, but if the water and electricity were cut off later, we could only last for 3 years at most. Since I died early in my last life, I had no idea when this zombie apocalypse would end, but I believed the government wouldn't make us wait too long. We survived for 2 months under the protection of the electric fence and the fortified villa. The days of starving to death that I experienced in my past life were long gone. Even on that very day, out of fear, I prepared a hearty meal to ease the resentment and anger in my heart. The news continuously broadcast the zombie infection situation around the world. And even the Maldives was not spared. The report told of a middle-aged man who took his infected wife in a helicopter to see his mother one last time. After getting off the plane, he untied the ropes and let his wife and mother embrace. The mother, having no defense against her son and thinking he was there to save her, was immediately bitten on the neck and turned into a zombie. Then, the infection spread repeatedly, and the Maldives had fallen, and the culprit left early in the helicopter. Looking at the man's photo constantly flashing on the news, as expected, this was something Samuel would do. The infected wife was the neighbor with whom he had been flirting. In my previous life, Samuel had bought huge insurance policies for his mother, his younger sister, and me. and he had also obtained a helicopter pilot's license, saying it was for emergency use. It turned out that this was what he meant by emergency use. His younger sister had never worked. She had been living off her parents since graduating from high school and then leeching off me after I married Samuel. Now that her mother, who had always covered for her, was in trouble, she probably didn't stand a chance either. As for that female neighbor, it was obvious that she, equally selfish, had tried to drive Samuel out when she realized there weren't enough supplies to go around. Samuel had struck first, pushing her towards the zombies. Ruthless as he was, he had also wanted to defraud the insurance company, thus coming up with this scheme. With cameras everywhere in the Maldives, he was as stupid as a pig. Well, this time, the only person left for me to take revenge on was Samuel, 13. 3 more months passed in a daze. The villa began to have no water and electricity, and we started using the energy supplies I had bought. Boiling water with an alcohol lamp was slower. But fortunately, there was enough. For dinner, I managed to make some multigrain pancakes and we ate them with mineral water. Judging by how Leo and Michael wolfed them down, they must have tasted good. Large groups of people started mopping up the streets with weapons. Normally, bullets were useless against zombies, but the bullets fired this time were accompanied by thunder-like sounds. The zombies hit by the bullets quickly melted into a pool of zombie oil. It seemed that Taoist masters had been invited to help. As the power went out, TV and internet signals also disappeared one after another. The government installed solar-powered speakers on each street. The country has developed a viable biochemical weapon. Please survivors, keep your doors and windows closed and stay away from glass. We will conduct a large-scale cleanup of zombies. Men aged 16 to 40 can sign up to participate in the zombie cleanup. Participants will enjoy double rations, and rewards will be given according to their contributions in the battle. Michael immediately signed up. On that day, from the second floor, I saw nearly 100 emaciated men in the square. They were skin and bones, but their eyes were filled with determination. Although the apocalyptic crisis had not yet been fully resolved, seeing these heroes who stood up for their families and the country, I knew that the dawn was just around the corner. On the first day when Michael went to get his weapon, Leo tugged at the corner of his shirt. "Uncle, you must come back alive." The innocent words made Michael laugh. "Don't worry, I'll do my best so that you'll call me something else." On the 180th day of the zombie crisis, there were hardly any zombies left, and the government was still working hard to search for and eliminate the remaining ones. Michael had become a weapons expert. It was said that the Taoist master who had come out of seclusion had a connection with him in a past life and thought highly of him. Water, electricity, and the internet had been restored. On sunny days, small-scale outdoor activities were allowed, but people had to wear the smart helmets issued by the government. It was said that these helmets could mask the smell of humans. For Leo's safety, I still chose to stay in the villa. "You actually didn't die, you bitch, you lied to me. I'm going to kill you." The gaunt-looking Samuel was full of malice, holding a dagger and looking as if he wanted to pounce on me and stab me. "Whether I die or not won't stop you from cheating and killing your mother, you heartless bastard. Sign the divorce agreement right now." "Leo is staying with me." "I won't sign." "Don't think I don't know about your old lover. Did you disappear all this time to go to your lover? You're spouting nonsense. Do you think everyone is as promiscuous as you?" Before Samuel could say anything else, the police interrupted. "Personal disputes should be put on hold. Disrupting public order during a crisis is a serious crime. Please come with us." Looking at the face that had caused Leo and me to die a miserable death in my previous life, I suppressed the urge to stab him and let the police take him away. With charges such as disrupting public order during a crisis, insurance fraud, and premeditated murder, the law would punish him better than I could. In the end, due to the severity of his crimes and multiple convictions, Samuel was sentenced to death and executed immediately. I looked up and saw a bouncing figure on the second floor of the mall. Looking at the blue sky outside the courthouse, I finally let out the pent-up anger from my previous life. 14. As time passed, the zombie crisis was gradually forgotten like a dream, and everyone started a new life. Michael opened a new company and made a game based on the zombie apocalypse. With its surreal scenes and his well-known expert image, it became very popular. "Look, Ivy, I can leave you more money in my will now," Michael said, his eyes full of tenderness. "You really have a way with things." Then when will you agree to be with me again? Let me think. You can have a kiss first. In this life, I finally had a happy ending. Story 2. In order to make a living, my wife and I opened a pork shop. It's a sweltering hot day, and strangely enough, all our regular customers are scrambling to buy cured bacon, while the fresh meat is completely ignored. This really is quite an unusual situation. 01. I run a pork shop in the local area, and it's a husband and wife business. The most sought-after items in our small shop aren't the fresh meats, but rather the old hams and cured bacon. Every year, when the autumn and winter seasons arrive and the northwest wind starts to blow, I begin to marinate a large quantity of cured bacon. To be honest, the taste of our cured bacon is truly exceptional, and it just gets more fragrant the longer it's stored. But this year is really strange. Usually, in summer, not many people buy cured bacon, yet this time it's selling like hotcakes. It's really quite baffling, and it's hard to make sense of this situation. Blaze, this regular customer of ours, actually wanted to buy up all the cured bacon in my stock. But I told him that there wasn't much left in stock. He insisted, asking me to make some for him even in summer, and he wanted a rather large quantity. Of course, I refused. Cured bacon made in summer just doesn't have the right taste. It's not as good, and we can't do anything to ruin our reputation. I thought that would be the end of it, but who would have thought that Blaze came back the next day? He immediately demanded 500 gene of cured bacon. I told him that it couldn't be made in this season because the taste would be too poor. He stubbornly insisted on buying it, saying that his old father really liked this, and even if the taste was a bit off, it was still much better than that from other shops. I couldn't help but tease him. You shouldn't eat too much of it even if it's delicious. Experts have said that eating too much cured bacon can easily cause cancer. Blaze sneered disdainfully. Can you really believe those so-called experts? There's not a single word of truth coming out of their mouths. I smiled and turned down the air conditioning a few more degrees. You're right, this summer is so hot and humid, and those experts still say it's normal. They're just talking nonsense. Blaze nodded. The weather this year is indeed abnormal. We have to be more careful ourselves. How long will it take to make the cured bacon? About 14 days. Okay, that'll work. Also, prepare 200 gene of lard for me. Blaze, what on earth are you going to do with all this? Can your family really consume so much? My old father loves it, so there's nothing I can do. All right, I'll deliver it to you along with the cured bacon when it's ready. All these regular customers are buying in incredibly large quantities, starting with enough to last a whole year at a time. The sales of fresh meat are still normal, but I just feel that something isn't quite right. 02. I have an old house in the mountains on the outskirts. The yard is really big, covering an area of 3 mu, and there's also a large cave. I make all these meat products in that cave. When I took the orders, I was overjoyed, thinking that I could make a lot of money this time. But when I started making them, I almost exhausted myself. The cave and the yard were filled with things. The quantity was almost the same as what I've made in the past few years combined. When I delivered the goods to Blaze's house, I was actually stopped by the doorman. Blaze lives in that villa area with more than 90 single-family villas. The people living there are all prominent figures in our area. Normally, someone like me, a familiar face, could enter freely, but today the doorman, Beckett, just wouldn't let me in. He insisted that the owner had to come out and pick up the goods in person. I got a bit angry and shouted at Beckett, "Beckett, you've grown a temper in just a few days, haven't you? You're even stopping me." Beckett said seriously, "Griffin, this is a new rule set by the property owners committee. Don't make things difficult for me. Just call the owner quickly." There was nothing I could do, so I had to give Blaze a call. Soon enough, Blaze came out smiling and apologized to me. "Griffin, I'm really sorry. The property owners committee has a new rule that doesn't allow non-residents to enter. Please help me move the goods to my car." Like this, I made calls to several other customers one after another, and they all came out to pick up the goods in their cars personally. During this time, I also saw a large amount of daily necessities like rice, flour, and cooking oil being transported outside the community. Moreover, I noticed that the walls of the community had been heightened and reinforced, and there was even an electric fence installed. This really seems rather strange no matter how you look at it. After delivering the goods, I was so sore and tired that my back and legs ached. In the evening, when I talked about this with my wife, She also thought it was strange and said that there were many people who wanted to buy cured bacon today, but she didn't accept their orders. It's really exhausting. Later, I mentioned that our cured bacon and lard won't go bad even if they're stored for several years, especially that old cured bacon. The longer it's stored, the more flavorful it becomes. Could it be that something really is going to happen? My wife comforted me not to think too much. We've been so tired these days, so we should go to bed early. As long as my child and I are by her side, she's not afraid even if the sky were to fall. She then said, "Honey, we've earned a lot these days. Let's replace the doors and windows of our building. It always lets in the wind in winter, and the child always complains about being cold. Since it's hot now, let's replace them with new ones and seal them properly." "Sure, my wife, I'll go and take a look tomorrow morning. Let's not make cured bacon for a few days. It's tiring and hot, and the taste of the bacon made now won't be as good. We can't ruin our reputation." 03. The next day, I went to the building materials market, and it felt a bit deserted. I found Luca, who is in the decoration business. Speaking of Luca, he's from the same village as me, and we get along really well. His family is from a big household, which is quite different from our small family. There are more than 100 households in the village, and I've always been quite low-key. As soon as I entered his shop, I directly threw a pack of Jean Yulon cigarettes on the table. Luca picked up the cigarettes, smiled, and said, "You're always so polite. Come on, have a taste of my tea, brother." I walked over and sat down, took a sip of the tea, and then asked, "Luca, why does it seem like there aren't many people here?" Luca sighed, "Everyone has been sent out. It's really strange. Actually, I've been so busy these days that I haven't had a moment's rest. There's still a great demand these days, but we can't get the goods in this small place now, and we can't take on new jobs. So it looks like there are fewer people around." I comforted him. "It's good to be busy. After all, there's money to be made. We work hard just to have a cozy life with our wives, children, and a warm bed, right? What kind of jobs have been keeping you so busy?" Luca said, "I really can't understand what those rich people are thinking. Their houses are perfectly fine, but they insist on adding insulation layers. Recently, the building materials market around here has run out of stock, and we can't even order materials from the manufacturers." I thought it was a bit strange. Is the demand really that high? Didn't you ask the owners what was going on? Luca shrugged. Who knows? They just said that their houses were cold and drafty last winter. Some people even added an extra layer to their windows and wanted to seal them properly. I frowned. "Luca, don't you think this is a bit strange?" Luca waved his hand. "What's so strange about it? Those rich people have too much money and don't know what to do with it. They can spend it however they like. By the way, what did you come to see me for?" That's when I remembered the main thing. "Well, my building also lets in the cold wind in winter. I was thinking about adding some insulation materials and replacing the doors and windows or something. For your building, don't worry, I'll send someone to take a look at your place later," Luca said as he picked up the cigarette on the table, lit it, and took a deep puff. "But Luca, didn't you just say that the building materials are out of stock now?" I asked, feeling a bit puzzled. Luca exhaled a puff of smoke and smiled. "Brother, those rich people are asking for high-grade materials that can withstand extremely low temperatures of -60 to 70 degrees Celsius. Even the doors and windows are made of special materials that are explosion-proof and resistant to low temperatures. What do we ordinary folks need such luxurious things for?" "Luca, the lowest temperature here in previous years was only -20 degrees Celsius. Why would they need materials that can withstand such low temperatures?" I furrowed my brow. Luca waved his hand and said casually, "What's so strange about it? Maybe those rich people think this place is like the Antarctic, -70 degrees Celsius. It's all because they have too much money to burn. I'll send someone to contact you later and go to your place to take a look in person, then we can figure out the most cost-effective way to do it according to the actual situation." "Okay, Luca, then I'll be waiting for your call." I nodded and left Luca's shop with a bit of doubt in my heart. I always feel that something is going to happen. 04. I decided to check out several local high-end villa areas. Along the way, I noticed that the walls of many villa areas were being reinforced. Some of the reinforcement work had already been completed, making the walls look extremely sturdy. Outside each community, logistics vehicles were shuttling back and forth busily, constantly unloading and loading goods. This bustling scene made the doubts in my heart even stronger. When I drove past a particularly high-end villa area, I found a lot of black cinders scattered on the road. Out of curiosity, I stopped the car and walked closer to take a look. To my surprise, they were actually coal cinders. Nowadays, even in rural areas, burning coal is gradually being phased out, so why would these high-end villa areas buy a large amount of coal? Looking at the coal cinders scattered on the road, I guessed that the amount of coal they bought must be quite substantial. This discovery made me even more confused. At the same time, it made me realize that the residents of these high-end villa areas seemed to be preparing for something that was about to happen. With a heart full of doubts, I received a call from my wife. Griffin, my elder sister is back from the capital. Bring a few dishes back tonight. Wasn't our elder sister working as a nanny in the capital? It's not a holiday now. Why did she come back? I asked, feeling puzzled. Who knows? She said that the owner's family is going to renovate the house and let her come back to rest for a while in advance. They even gave her 3 months' salary in advance and told her to go back after the house renovation is finished. My wife explained. In the evening, when I saw my elder sister, I asked her curiously, "Elder sister, your employer is really nice to give you a few months paid leave." "That's right, the owner's family is really good. They gave me 3 months pay. Some employers only give 1 month's pay, or even no pay at all," my elder sister replied, hearing my elder sister's description. The doubts in my heart grew deeper. What's going on? Could it be that all the nannies in your area were asked to come back? More or less, anyway, quite a few people were given a vacation. They said they were going to carry out renovation on the old residential areas, which would take a few months, my elder sister explained. I felt that things were not that simple, so I continued to ask, are the villa areas also going to have the old residential area renovation? Who knows, anyway. It has nothing to do with me. I get paid and don't have to work. That's great. My elder sister didn't seem to care about the reason. Seeing that my elder sister didn't want to talk more about it, I didn't press further. I could only echo, "That's true. You haven't seen your husband and child for a long time, have you? I'll send you home tomorrow." That night, lying in bed, I tossed and turned, always feeling that something was going to happen. These rich people are acting so strangely in every way. 05. In the dead of night, a sudden shattering sound of glass pierced through the stillness, jolting me awake from my sleep. The air was filled with a bone-chilling cold that made one's hair stand on end. I looked around and was horrified to find my wife standing there motionless, holding our child in her arms. Their bodies seemed to have become stiff, and no matter how much I called out to them, there was not the slightest response. I trembled as I walked towards them, my heart filled with overwhelming fear and despair. I reached out my hand and gently touched my wife's cheek. All I felt was an icy coldness seeping through my fingertips. Suddenly, her body cracked under my touch, as if the fragile ice layer had been shattered. Then her entire body began to break apart, turning into countless ice crystals that scattered to the ground. The sight in front of me made me scream in horror. I stumbled backward and fell to the ground. I struggled to get up, only to find that my hands were tightly stuck to the floor. I tried my best to pull them away, but the floor seemed to have stuck to my hands, making it impossible for me to move. I was horrified to find that I was being swallowed up by the floor, and I was being frozen into ice along with its coldness. My hands gradually lost their sensation, becoming stiff and cold. I fought with all my might to break free, but the coldness of the floor became more and more intense. As if it were going to swallow me whole, I screamed in terror, but my voice was swallowed up by the icy air and couldn't be heard. Just then, a series of urgent calls pulled me back to reality. I suddenly opened my eyes and found myself lying in bed, my clothes soaked in sweat. It turned out to be just a dream. I got up and sat by the bedside, still filled with lingering fear. "Did you have a nightmare?" my wife asked worriedly. I comforted my wife and then went to the balcony alone to smoke. I still couldn't calm down from the fear and despair I had just experienced. I had no more. The next day, after sending my elder sister off, I returned to the pork shop, took stock of the inventory, closed the shop, and then took my wife back to our old house. 06. The journey to the old house wasn't very far, just a few dozen kilometers. I was still haunted by the nightmare from last night, but I didn't dare to tell my wife about it for fear that she would worry on the way. My wife noticed that I didn't look right and asked with concern, Griffin, is there something wrong back at our hometown? No, I suspect that there might be extreme weather this year. Let's go back and take stock of things and make some preparations, I said. My wife didn't seem to care at all and said, extreme weather, you must be tired. Stop imagining things. Everything is fine, isn't it, wife? I'm really okay. I'm just a bit worried. Why did all those regular customers come to buy so much old cured bacon and lard this year? My wife couldn't help but laugh. Griffin, stop imagining things. Our cured bacon is delicious, and the lard is fragrant too. They probably want to stock up more. You know, these days, there aren't many delicious things to be found. I frowned, still feeling uneasy, and said, Wife, don't you think it's strange that these regular customers suddenly bought so much cured bacon and lard all at once? But no matter what, they shouldn't be buying hundreds of gin at a time. We've been doing this business every year, and those regular customers usually only buy a few dozen gin at a time. This time, the amount they bought is 10 times more than usual. There must be something going on here. I paused and then continued. And there's also the matter of our elder sister coming back from the capital. Don't you think it's strange? She's working as a nanny in a high-end villa area. Now she says that the whole community is going to have an old residential area renovation and they sent all the nannies home. I just don't believe it. Even if there really is going to be a renovation, don't the old people and children at home need someone to take care of them? I guess they sent the nannies home because they're afraid that some information might leak out. My wife looked confused and said, Stop imagining things. To store it for a long time, then why don't they just buy fresh pork and freeze it and eat it slowly? I smiled and replied, Wife, have we ever eaten that kind of pork that has been frozen for a long time? That kind of meat loses its taste and nutrition after being frozen for a long time. It tastes like zombie meat and no one would like it. I always feel that there might be some problems with food in the future. We still have to go back to the old house and take a look, and stock up on some grains and things first. My wife still didn't quite understand and said, even if there's something wrong, I think the city should be safer than the countryside, right? I shook my head and said, Wife, there are so many people and so much going on in the city. If something really happens, we ordinary people will be in a real fix. In the countryside, there's more space, fewer people, and it's easier to be self-sufficient. My wife was a bit worried and asked, Then what about the child? If we both go back to our hometown, who will pick up the child from school? I replied, Let's go back and take a look first. Figure out what we have at the old house and what we're lacking, then we'll come back. We won't open the meat shop for now. I'll move all the goods we've purchased these days to the old house and make them into cured bacon for storage. My wife was still a bit worried and said, Should we tell our elder sister about this so that they can also make some preparations? I waved my hand and said, Wife, this is really hard to say. We're not sure yet. If something really happens, elder sister and the others will definitely blame us for not telling them earlier. If nothing happens in the end, elder sister will say that we scared her and made her worry for nothing. Right now, we're just making guesses. It's better not to tell them, so as not to end up in an awkward situation. 07. At present, the supplies at home are as follows. There are 3 large freezers. There is one 10 kW diesel generator. There is a certain amount of diesel reserves, but diesel doesn't work well at low temperatures. It's likely to freeze if it's cold. We need to change to a gasoline generator. There is a cellar, and the entrance is inside the house. Generally, the temperature difference between the cellar and the ground is only about 10 degrees. The house is newly renovated. Because the house is on a hillside, it's quite cold in winter, so when renovating, we were quite generous with the materials. The walls are thicker than those of old-fashioned buildings. The glass is double-layered, and the doors and windows are made of broken bridge aluminum. The walls also have an insulation layer. The traditional heated Kong and fire walls have also been retained. Personally, I think if this house can't withstand the low temperature, the buildings in the city have even less chance. There are solar panels on the roof. After all, it's a rural area in the mountains, and the power supply is not stable. The fuel generator and the solar panels are the guarantees of electricity supply. There are 3 bedrooms and a large living room. There are 2 auxiliary rooms, as well as an independent kitchen, bathroom, and boiler room. Inside the house, there are heated kangs, fire walls, and heating installed. There is no lack of daily household appliances. since I often come here to process pork. There are TVs, refrigerators, washing machines, and other appliances for daily life. It's cool in the mountains, so there's no air conditioner. The large yard covers an area of 3 mu, surrounding a large cave on the halfway up the hillside and a small factory building, where the diesel generator, freezers, and some sundries are placed. There are wells in both the factory building and the main house, which are commonly known as Old Man's Joy and can be used to collect groundwater. Grain reserves. There is some grain stored in the cellar, including 150 gene of rice, 200 gene of flour, 300 gene of sweet potatoes, and a certain amount of oil and salt. There are also some tobacco and alcohol for daily visits with relatives. After all, I'm from a rural background, and I have the habit of storing grain. There are also several jars of loose liquor brewed in the village. All of these are the aftermath of the pandemic. The cellar has a large space and is very dry. There are at least 200 gene of old cured bacon and old hams. These are the goods that we've stored for our own family to eat for several years. There are also dozens of kilograms of lard. There are 2 big dogs in the yard, Black and its wife Yellow, who guard the house. The fence is quite tall, and there is barbed wire on it. My wife and I took stock and were a bit confused. We didn't know what kind of disaster would happen either. We felt that we didn't lack anything, and it was ready for us to move in at any time. For now, we're just making preparations for a relatively long winter. We initially consider using 1 bag of 50 gene of rice and 1 bag of 50 gene of flour per month, considering that the shelf life of rice is only 18 months and the shelf life of flour is 12 months. We plan to store 18 bags of rice and 12 bags of flour. We plan to buy some vegetables that can be stored for a long time. We're not sure if summer cabbages can be stored well, so we don't dare to buy them, so we still prefer to buy some commonly stocked foods like instant noodles, self-heating pots, compressed biscuits, and various dried foods. We also need to secretly buy some coal because the gas supply may not be available. The most precious supply for heating is coal. How can people in city buildings use it? Install a big boiler in a building? That's ridiculous. To deal with extreme weather, this old house is more suitable. We can do whatever we want here. In previous years, we burned less than 3 tons of coal in the 4 winter months. This year, we'll buy more, but we need to rely on connections to buy it. Let's try to get 12 tons first and then try to get as much as possible. We have enough space at home, so we can store it all. As long as there is enough coal to burn, we definitely won't freeze to death. The more coal, the better. We also need to store some gasoline and diesel, but if we buy them personally, we can't buy a large amount. We'll just buy as much as we can. We also need to store some engine oil and spare parts for the fuel engines. The engine oil needs to be changed every 200 hours, so we need to prepare more engine oil. After considering these supplies, we're still a bit confused. After all, we're just making preparations based on guesses. Disastrous weather can be extremely cold, extremely hot, floods, earthquakes. Currently, it's extremely hot, but I'm more inclined to think that extreme cold weather will occur in the future. It's unknown when it will appear and how long it will last. Also, I suddenly thought of something. As the saying goes, an ordinary man is innocent, but possessing wealth can be his downfall. If a big disaster occurs and I'm the only one who has stocked up so many things, and I'm a small family in this village, then those big families in the village will surely try to take everything from me like hungry wolves. At noon, we had a big meal at the old house. My wife and I checked everything at home. The bedding and other things were all in good condition, and we had a delicious meal. After the meal, I asked my wife to drive back to the city to buy medicine. I specifically told her to buy a lot of commonly used medicine, so as not to end up in a situation like during the pandemic when we couldn't buy it even if we wanted to. As for me, I was thinking about how to get the villagers involved in the preparations together, so as not to become someone else's target. I think after the pandemic, the villagers should have stored some grain at home. There should be no problem with food in the short term. And there is also a deep well in the village for drinking water. I'm just worried that if it's extremely cold, without making preparations in advance, there will be big problems with heating. Throughout history, in which natural disaster wasn't human disaster even more terrifying, stocking up things secretly definitely won't work. We still need to get a group of people to do it together in order to save our own lives. Only when those big families have everything they need will our small families be able to keep our things. During times of great disaster, what we should be most wary of is people's hearts. People's hearts are often like this. They envy you when you have something and look down on you when you don't. It's okay if social order doesn't collapse, but once social order collapses, these feelings will be magnified infinitely. 08. We can't just approach them directly. We need to ask Lennox to step in for this matter. Speaking of Lennox, this name isn't given casually. Lennox's original name is Quinn. He's over 80 years old, but he's still in good health. He had a long friendship with my grandfather. This old man has been on the battlefield and has seen a lot of the world. He has a straightforward personality and a very high prestige in the village. I've always had a good relationship with him. Whenever I have something to ask him, he will always give me advice. He used to be the village head for a few years, and there's nothing in the village that he doesn't know. I'm going to find Lennox and discuss this with him to see what he thinks. If Lennox thinks there's something wrong with this, with his word, the villagers will definitely think twice. As a veteran, he always speaks directly and doesn't beat around the bush. I carried 2 bottles of strong liquor and went straight to Lennox's house. The old man knew exactly what was going on and knew that I must have something to talk about. He's always been straightforward, so he directly told me to speak my mind and not beat around the bush in front of him. So, I told Lennox everything I had seen and heard in the city's villa areas, the situation in my shop, and the matter of my elder sister who works as a nanny, all in detail. After listening, Lennox frowned and pondered for a moment, then he said, "This matter seems to be quite serious. You were right to come to me. You can't be the one to deal with this. You go back first. I'll go find Dorian, our village head, who is also Quinn's nephew, and ask him to take the lead. You just pretend that you don't know anything and secretly make your preparations." Hearing what Lennox said, I immediately felt more at ease. Before I left, Lennox added another reminder, "You're so thoughtless, just bringing wine and not any cured bacon. Don't do this next time." I quickly replied, "Lennox, don't worry, there will definitely be enough cured bacon for you." I don't know how things were arranged on their side, but Lennox is really decisive and has great prestige. After dinner in the evening, I was wondering how things would develop when the village head Dorian called, "Griffin, gather at the village committee at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. No excuses, those who are nearby have to come back. We won't talk about those who are far away for now." "Uncle, I'm right in the village." "Is there something wrong?" the village head said sternly. "Don't ask what you shouldn't, just be there on time." After hanging up the phone, I secretly gave Lennox a thumbs up in my heart. He's really reliable. The next morning, I arrived at the village committee on time and found that the village head and Lennox were already there. Several of us who do business in the nearby city were also called back. The village head slammed the door shut and then started scolding, "You little rascals. You only know how to make money outside. You haven't come back to visit the old people at home for so long. Have you forgotten your roots? Do you still want to stay in this village?" Dorian stared at Luca and said, "I heard that you haven't come back to see your father for more than 2 months. What big money are you making that you don't even care about your father?" Luca quickly defended himself. "Uncle, it's not that I don't want to come back. This year's business is really strange. Some people want explosion-proof doors and windows, and some want super strong insulation. All of them are based on the standard of -70 degrees Celsius. My shop's technology couldn't keep up. I was training my workers while working. I was really busy all the time." When Luca said this, everyone started chatting and arguing noisily. Elijah, who is in the logistics business, also chimed in, "This year is really strange. Those rich people are buying things by the truckload. I even suspect that their houses are about to be filled up." Zeke, who is in the clothing and hat wholesale business, also complained, "In the middle of summer, there are very few people buying summer clothes. Everyone is ordering cold-proof clothes. Isn't this crazy? It's the off-season for cold-proof clothes, but this year it's like the peak season." I couldn't help but interrupt. "I also think it's strange. The most popular things bought in my shop are old cured bacon and other foods that can be stored for a long time." Soren, who runs a chain of pharmacies, also scratched his head and said, "There have been a lot more people coming to the pharmacy to buy medicine recently. It's really strange." Knox, the foreman, also continued, "The work in the villa areas is also very strange. They all require the walls to be heightened and reinforced, and an electric fence to be installed, and the construction period is very urgent. As if they're in a hurry for something, everyone was talking one after another, all expressing the same meaning, preparing for cold weather, stocking up on food and medicine, and preventing riots. The village head then made phone calls to other villagers who were doing business in big cities. The result was the same. There was a strange atmosphere everywhere, and it was all about preparing for cold weather. Stocking up, and preventing riots. The room suddenly fell silent. Everyone could feel that something big was about to happen, but they just didn't know exactly what it was. Finally, the village head broke the silence and looked at Lennox, saying, "Uncle, you have the most prestige. What do you think we should do about this?" 09. Lennox said decisively, "I have a hunch that something big is going to happen. Preparing cold-proof clothes and buying insulation supplies indicate that it will be very cold in winter. Preventing riots implies that there may be social unrest. We don't know exactly what will happen, but it's always better to make preparations. Those who can come back to the village should be called back. We won't force those who don't want to come back. Those families with poor conditions can move to live in the village committee. The village committee will also store grain and reinforce the houses, adding heated kangs and fire walls for cold protection. What do you all think?" Everyone nodded in agreement and had no objections. Disasters themselves are not the most terrifying thing. What's really terrifying is the unrest that follows social chaos. Therefore, we must unite and face it together. The truth is simple. But not everyone has the courage and charisma like Lennox, I added. Lennox. The drastic change in the weather may not wait until winter. According to our analysis just now, it may happen within the next month or two. We also need to consider the construction period and set a time limit, Luca responded. Currently, all the projects are required to be completed within a month. If we can't finish on time, the owners are even willing to increase the payment on their own initiative. So, it should be about a month from now. Hearing this news, the room fell silent again. Then, Lennox broke the silence. Then we'll make preparations based on a 1-month time limit. Those who can come back should try their best to come back. Call the heads of each family to a meeting. This matter must not be spread outside. In addition, I'm willing to contribute 50,000 yuan to do my part. I'll also move to live in the village committee at that time. Lennox's statement played a leading role. Several villagers from small families also expressed their willingness to contribute money and effort. 30,000 yuan, 50,000 yuan, 100,000 yuan. I also contributed 100,000 yuan. After all, it was me who encouraged Lennox to step forward, not for anything else, but out of admiration for Lennox's sense of responsibility. The most generous one was Soren, who runs the pharmacy. He excitedly expressed that he was willing to contribute 500,000 yuan and would immediately arrange to send the inventory from the pharmacy back to the village. He really went all out. Lennox is saving everyone's lives, although nothing has happened yet and Soren is still safe. Once something happens, as the richest person in the village, he will become an easy target. If everyone makes preparations in advance and has hope of survival, then Soren will be safe in the village. We just need to be on guard against people from other villages. At the same time, I also guessed that Soren might know more than we do. After all, he's in the pharmaceutical business and has more connections. Maybe he just doesn't dare to say it. So everyone started to act separately. Zeke began to arrange to send the cold-proof clothes from the shop back to the village. Elijah used a large truck to transport the supplies. I also promised to make a large amount of cured bacon for the villagers. Luca started to transfer the construction team back to the village to first renovate the house of the village committee, reinforce the insulation facilities, and then build heated kangs, fire walls, and even earth kong floor heating. I felt that everyone had already noticed something was wrong, but no one dared to point it out and no one dared to talk about it. They were all secretly making preparations. Now, with Lennox as the backbone, they dared to take action openly. Then, in the name of the village committee, we began to sort out the reserve list. How many people were there in the village? How much grain, fuel, power generation, and water storage were needed, and so on. Although we asked everyone not to spread the news, how could it not be spread? The village is a place where there are a lot of people and a lot of gossip. Soon, the news spread. Some people laughed at our village, and some people came to our village to try to get some information and learn from us. In short, there were all kinds of people. Our village was relatively united. After all, there was a prestigious person like Lennox. He was from a big family in the village, and the people from small families didn't dare to cause trouble. The people from big families, who were all Lennox's juniors, also didn't dare to cause trouble. Occasionally, there were a few people who were lazy and tried to cheat. But these were small matters and couldn't cause much of a commotion for small families. They could just focus on preparing for the natural disaster. At least they didn't have to worry too much about being bullied after the natural disaster. The villagers had stocked up enough food, so there was no need to fight over it. The most surprising and admirable person was still Lennox. Lennox secretly arranged for a few people to get a lot of gunpowder. Lennox also secretly gave me a homemade shotgun. This old man really has connections. He was preparing for the possibility that someone might cause trouble in the future. But, is the disaster really just extremely cold weather? What if the extremely cold weather doesn't come? Lennox will have to bear the anger of the villagers. 10. I chose to stay and live in the old house. I had my own plans. My old house had an excellent location and a high terrain. It was located in the deepest part of the village and backed onto a mountain. If there really was any unrest, I would have more time to deal with it. In the house in the city, I also placed some drinking water and food and other daily necessities. Not much, just as a thought for my old neighbors. I couldn't say this directly, but if my neighbors were short of supplies, they would definitely break into my old house. I hope it can help some people. There are some things that can be done, but not said. People's hearts are unpredictable. For the renovation of my old house, in addition to sealing and insulating the house itself, I also added a heated earth con, floor heating, and reinforced the cellar. The cellar was the last resort, after all. The cellar was 4 to 5 meters deep. Even in the worst case, it was thicker than the walls of the house. Right. I also prepared a pedal generator, medicine, and so on. I also piled a large part of the coal and firewood indoors. My wife also specially prepared a lot of nutrient soil. I have to admire the wisdom of women. It will bring great joy to our life in the future. There was no change outside the village, except for rumors of the construction of underground fortifications in various places. Social order was still relatively stable. I have to give credit to the country for this, because the weather was getting hotter and hotter. There were more and more rumors in the village. Some people began to speak ill of Lennox behind his back. Lennox didn't care at all. He still demanded that the house of the village committee be further reinforced and the insulation and warmth retention be strengthened. Lennox took the lead and moved in first. 11. At night. The quiet village was surrounded by the deep darkness, with only a few stars twinkling in the sky. I walked outside, intending to get some fresh air, but the scene in front of me left me instantly stunned. The sky seemed to be gently waved by colorful ribbons. Green, purple, and red light bands were jumping and intertwining in the air, like a carnival dance in heaven. I had never seen such a beautiful and mysterious scene before. It felt a bit like the aurora I had seen on TV. And I couldn't help but be mesmerized. Just then, strings of sparks burst out from the high-voltage power line tower in the distance, like ignited fireworks, extremely dazzling in the night sky. The lights in the village went out one by one, and the surroundings were plunged into darkness, leaving only the colorful light bands in the sky still dancing. I tried to take out my phone to check what was going on, but found that the phone screen was black and wouldn't respond no matter how I pressed it. Suddenly, a hissing and crackling noise came from the village radio, like the interference caused by unstable current, which made people feel annoyed. All kinds of strange phenomena began to occur in the village one after another. Cars suddenly sounded their alarms, and the headlights flickered on and off, as if echoing the light bands in the sky. The TV screen at home inexplicably turned on and flashed with snowflakes. My heart was filled with doubts and fear. I didn't know what the connection was between this beautiful dance in the sky and these strange phenomena, but I could feel that this peaceful night had been completely changed. With the failure of various electronic devices, the villagers began to panic. They all came out of their houses to check what was happening. When they looked up at the sky, they were all deeply attracted by the magnificent scene. For a moment, the village was in a state of panic, and everyone was guessing what was going on. The power supply was cut off, the communication was interrupted, and the generator was burned out. The village became an information island. The expected extremely cold weather did not come as scheduled. Instead, a wave of heat accompanied by sudden and strange phenomena arrived. The villagers' lives fell into chaos. It was extremely hot and unbearable, and the anger in the villagers' hearts was even more difficult to contain. They angrily gathered in front of the village committee, venting their dissatisfaction towards Lennox. Lennox, look at what's going on, all our electrical appliances are destroyed, and you have to be responsible, roared Jagger, a burly man. His face was red with anger, and his eyes were wide open as he stared at Lennox. The others were also enraged. They waved their arms and kept cursing. In their opinion, Lennox should be fully responsible for this disaster. Their selfishness and ignorance were fully exposed at this moment. They only cared about their own losses. In the face of the villagers' accusations and abuse, Lennox remained calm. He took a deep breath and prepared to explain. However, the villagers didn't want to listen to his explanation. They just wanted to find someone to vent their anger on, someone to take the blame. Just when the tense atmosphere was about to trigger a conflict, I struggled to push through the crowd. I picked up the homemade shotgun, pulled the trigger towards the sky, and there was a loud bang. This gunshot instantly suppressed the villagers' anger, and the scene suddenly fell silent. I stood in front of Lennox, holding the shotgun tightly in my hand, and shouted loudly, "Whoever dares to take another step forward, try it." Jagger said disdainfully to me, "Griffin, what are you getting involved in? This is our family's business. You're an outsider, so stay out of it." Although I knew that Jagger was a jerk and a rascal, I didn't expect that in the face of interests, he would dare to be so arrogant and provoke Lennox. I didn't respond, but just pointed the muzzle of the gun at him silently. Seeing this, Jagger flinched and didn't dare to act rashly anymore. Lennox was very calm. He motioned for me to step aside and then said contemptuously to Jagger, "Jagger, who do you think you are? Call your father here. You're not qualified to act arrogantly here." Jagger retorted unyieldingly, "Lennox, you could have let everyone prepare in advance, but now we've suffered heavy losses. Don't you think you should give us an explanation?" Jagger's few lackeys also chimed in, "That's right, we all did as Lennox told us to do. Lennox, you have to be responsible for our losses." I was filled with anger. These people were really shameless. Lennox remained unmoved. He took the homemade shotgun from my hand and aimed it at the wooden stick in the hand of one of Jagger's lackeys. With a bang, the wooden stick broke in two. The young man was so scared that he wet his pants, and his face turned pale. This gunshot completely intimidated the scene. He held the gun and asked coldly, "I didn't hear clearly just now. Who wants to tell me exactly what's going on?" Surprisingly, no one came forward to speak at this time. The voice of the village head Dorian came from the crowd. "Everyone, calm down. Please listen to me for a moment." The villagers started whispering again. The cold protection and reinforcement were decisions made by the village committee, and it has nothing to do with Lennox personally. The damage to the electrical appliances today is entirely due to the natural disaster, which is beyond human control, said Dorian. The villagers were still not satisfied and demanded a clear solution from the village. In the face of the villagers' intense emotions, Dorian made a promise. Regarding the losses caused to everyone by the cold protection and reinforcement, the village will be fully responsible for compensation. The damage to the electrical appliances today is purely due to the natural disaster and has nothing to do with Lennox. The village will do its best to assist everyone in issuing certificates, handling insurance claims, or reporting the situation to the higher authorities, and will try its best to strive for more compensation for everyone. Hearing that there was hope for compensation, the villagers gradually calmed down, and the scene gradually returned to order. Just then, Jagger's father finally showed up. He grabbed Jagger's ear hard and dragged him all the way in front of Lennox, and apologized to Lennox. Jagger's father had a face full of guilt and apology, and kept bowing and apologizing, saying that he would discipline his son well. After this series of twists and turns, the matter was finally truly resolved. However, the behavior of Jagger and his father made me extremely disgusted. 12. It was only a few days later that we learned that the largest solar electromagnetic storm in history had occurred. The power supply and communication had all been damaged to varying degrees. It would still take a considerable amount of time to restore the communication and power supply. Most of the civilian electrical appliances and equipment had been damaged. Many villagers had their own thoughts, and they were no longer enthusiastic about the cold protection arrangements. However, Lennox still led a group of people to continue repairing the house of the village committee. He even felt that what had been done so far was far from enough. Lennox was also arranging for people to repair the generators and other machinery in the village, but the progress was not optimistic. Some people also left the village, but these people didn't know that an even greater disaster was really about to come. For days before the disaster occurred, the temperature suddenly soared, the sun hung high in the sky like a ball of fire, as if it was going to melt the whole world. People walking under the scorching sun felt as if they were being roasted by flames. There was dissatisfaction and anxiety in the village. Some people began to blame Lennox again, as if he could control the weather. 3 days before the disaster, the heat did not subside but became even more intense. The place where people lived in the village committee became extremely hot. Some people chose to move back to their own homes because they couldn't stand such an environment. People's hearts became even more scattered. 2 days before the disaster, the heat wave raged even more. Even in the shade, there was no sense of coolness. The wind carried a burning temperature. To make matters worse, some villagers found that the wells in their homes had dried up. Lennox took the lead in stockpiling water decisively, but his action attracted the criticism of some villagers. They complained and doubted Lennox's motives to his face. I went to the village committee again and asked Lennox to come to my place. Lennox refused. Lennox insisted on staying in the village committee. When I got home, I also started to stockpile as much water as possible. Fortunately, both of my old man's joy wells could still draw water. One day before the disaster, the sun was still scorching hot, but there was a strange silence all around. The chirping of birds and the sounds of insects in the mountains and forests had all disappeared, leaving only a deathly stillness. This oppressive atmosphere made more people choose to leave. Some people who had left before also returned to the village and brought shocking news from the city. The army was transferring a large number of residents. This news caused a great stir in the village. However, the tense atmosphere and the questioning of Lennox also reached their peak at the same time. Lennox completely ignored these negative voices. My wife, my child, and I all stayed at home and did not go out. The 2 big dogs were also lying in the house. On the day of the incident, the temperature rose again. The sun was blazing, and the sunlight was so intense that it could almost melt everything. No one dared to stay outdoors for a long time, otherwise their skin would probably be burned. Some of the young people in the village were provoked by the heat and became dissatisfied again. They began to try to incite everyone to demand an explanation from Lennox, believing that all of this was Lennox's fault. Those brazen young people, not knowing the limits of their abilities, were wandering outside the village committee. They gathered outside the village committee with ill intentions, attempting to cause trouble and disrupt the order of the village to gain their own self-interests. Unfortunately, they simply couldn't withstand the invasion of the intense heat. Unable to endure the high temperature, they were defeated one by one after a short while and slunk away like stray dogs. At noon, the mountains and forests became even quieter, as if the whole world had held its breath. At this moment, there was not even a trace of wind or a sound. This kind of stillness made people feel an indescribable fear. It was terrifyingly quiet. Suddenly, an intermittent sound came from the radio. Zizla, these days by the solar electromagnetic storm, a lot of communication equipment destroyed, is still being gradually repaired. Zizla, communication may still be interrupted at any time. Please do not go out at home. Is expected to appear extreme cold weather. Zizla, please stay indoors. Do not go out to pay attention to prevent extreme cold weather. The radio repeated this several times, and then the signal seemed to be interrupted again. The sound of zizizi returned. The villagers laughed. In such a hot day, which fool was pretending to say that there would be extremely cold weather? Many villagers didn't believe it, and some even went to the mountains to enjoy the cool. I checked all the things again to ensure that I could light the stove at any time. I checked all the cold-proof clothes again. It was so hot that I broke out in a sweat while checking these. 13. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was awakened by the continuous barking of Black and Yellow. The child was scared and started crying, and my wife was comforting the child. There was fear in Black's eyes as it stared outside and barked wildly. I suddenly felt a chill and shivered all over. There was a cracking sound outside. There was also the sound of the glass in the room breaking. Damn it, the ground in the yard is freezing, I shouted. The ground was visibly freezing rapidly and moving towards the house. I shouted to my wife, you and the child go to the cellar quickly. I quickly started to light the fire on my side. The gasoline for the stove was already prepared. and the fire was lit immediately. It even burned a large patch of my hair. I called black over. I quickly closed the door of the house. The fire was lit, but the speed at which the ground was freezing didn't stop. Ice also appeared on the roof and slowly pressed down towards me. There was fear in Black's barking. Black's wife had already been dragged to the cellar by my wife. I didn't have time to think too much. Although the fire in the stove was lit, it still needed time to warm up. I just lit a fire directly in the room. I couldn't care too much. First, I had to avoid being frozen to death. There was firewood prepared in advance in the room. I carried a bundle and placed it in the middle of the room, poured gasoline on it, and then lit it. The flames shot up instantly. Although it was dangerous, I felt that the speed at which the ice on the wall was spreading downwards had decreased, but the ice was still slowly spreading downwards. Then I heard a clear click. The thermometer on the wall cracked. The lowest temperature that thermometer could measure was -30°C. I added some more firewood to the fire on the ground. The fire in the coal stove finally burned vigorously. At this time, I felt a little more relaxed. Only then did I realize that my body was aching from the cold. My wife came out of the cellar and put a fur coat on me, telling me to go into the cellar quickly. I saw that the fire had risen, and at least the coal stove wouldn't go out. So I pulled my wife and Black and we all got into the cellar together. My wife and the child were already fully dressed for warmth, looking like big balls. There was no stove in the cellar, but there was a stove above the cellar. The cold air shouldn't penetrate easily, and it was 4 to 5 meters deep. I put on my cold-proof clothes in the cellar. I told the child and my wife to stay down there properly. The child had stopped crying, but was also a bit dazed. I guess he was a bit frightened. I had to go up and guard the stove. The stove couldn't be allowed to go out. It was the hope for our whole family. If the fire in the stove went out, our whole family would be finished. My wife, with tears in her eyes, held onto me tightly and sobbed, not wanting me to go up, but I had no choice but to go up. It's said that after 10 years of marriage, a kiss between a couple can turn a nightmare into a series of good dreams. But still, I hugged my wife and kissed her on the cheek. This woman was rather strange. Instead of kicking me, she just said, "Come down quickly if there's any situation. If we're going to die, let's die together as a family. The child and I will be waiting for you in the cellar." When I went back to the ground again, a large area around the walls of the room was already covered in ice. However, the heated Kong and the fire wall were still working well. They didn't have ice on them, but they were making pop 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 sounds. I didn't know if the bricks would break under the extremely cold weather. I was really worried. I was afraid that the bricks wouldn't be able to withstand the drastic change in temperature and would break. With my limited scientific knowledge, these traditional methods still carried a great deal of risk. The windows of this room had been sealed up in advance. Otherwise, the window glass would definitely have broken. Who could have imagined that the temperature would drop so suddenly and drastically? The lowest temperature marked on the thermometer was -30°C. The thermometer had already been frozen and cracked, which meant that the temperature just now was far lower than -30°C. The fire in the coal stove was burning more and more vigorously and there was no sign of it going out. The ice on the wall also didn't continue to spread and there was no sign of it melting either. At present, it seemed that a balance had been reached. The cellar was under the room, so the temperature in the cellar shouldn't drop any further. I felt a bit more at ease, looking at the fire in the stove. I added some more coal. I also added some more firewood to the fire in the middle of the room. I mumbled to myself, no matter how cold it gets, it shouldn't be able to freeze the fire, right? As long as the fire doesn't go out, our family can survive. I guarded the stove, but I still felt cold, so I went back into the cellar again. I told my wife that the temperature had stabilized. My wife finally felt relieved. My wife and I said in unison, "We can survive like this." There was a pedal generator in the cellar, with the light on. It wasn't dark. There was also a thermometer hanging there, and the temperature was -20°C. It was cold, but with the warm clothes, at least we could still survive for now. I hugged my wife and our 2 children. We encouraged each other, but we were all dressed so thickly, like big balls, that we couldn't really hug properly. Holding hands was already a way for our family to be together. My wife and I were on the outside, and the 2 children were in the middle. The 2 dogs were also whining pitifully. I took out 2 big quilts and placed them around. the two big dogs got inside, and they were really frozen. We were really grateful to Black and Yellow, otherwise, we would have frozen to death in our sleep. My wife and I sighed. Just then, I wonder how many people had died. This rapid drop in temperature made me experience a scene just like in the movie, The Day After Tomorrow. I had always thought those scenes in the movie were made up. Now I knew that the ground and the walls could really freeze rapidly before one's eyes. I guessed blindly that the temperature outside was at least -40 or -50 degrees Celsius. It turned out that humans could still survive in such low temperatures. I didn't know how things were going at the village committee. I hoped Lennox was okay. Our family had survived the first critical moment. As long as the temperature didn't drop any further, our family could live on. 14. My wife was holding the child in her arms and said plaintively, with such a big disaster, "What on earth are those so-called experts doing?" I said, "These so-called experts also have their uses." My wife asked in confusion, "Why, are we just raising these experts for nothing?" I explained. If the experts publicly said that the end of the world was coming, do you know what the consequences would be? My wife said casually, "What consequences?" "We would make preparations in advance and actively try to save ourselves." I said seriously, "You're wrong. Then we might not even live to see the disaster happen. We could be killed by the people around us." My wife didn't understand. "Why?" I asked rhetorically. "Has Lennox been wronged? Has he had to bear the pressure?" How many people have thanked Lennox? Today, there were still people who wanted to cause trouble for Lennox. This is just in one village. How many people are there in a city? If people knew in advance that the end of the world was coming, society would be in chaos. My wife wiped her tears gently with her trembling hand. Her voice was low and trembly. "A lot of people will definitely die this time." I hugged my wife and children tightly and said, "At least our whole family is still alive. That's enough." I looked at the temperature in the cellar again. It was still -20 degrees Celsius. It seemed that the temperature outside had stabilized. I went out of the cellar again and checked the coal stove. The coal was burning well. The firewood on the ground had already burned out. Although the room was still very cold, there were no more changes to the surroundings and the ground. The sudden drop in temperature seemed to have ended. I didn't have the courage to move too far away from the coal stove. After all, I had never experienced such extreme cold. Who knew what would happen if I opened the door of the house? It was good enough for our family to stay here like this. A voice came from the cellar. "The child is hungry. Get something to eat." I was really in a dilemma. We had stored water, but it had frozen. The old man's joy, well, also seemed to be frozen. At least I didn't dare to go over there because the ground was covered in ice. I went back into the cellar, picked up a large iron bucket and placed it on the stove. The water in the iron bucket had all frozen. I just put it on the stove and started to heat it, but I wasn't in a hurry. After all, there were still several buckets of water. I could heat it slowly, after a rather long time. The ice in the bucket melted, then I found an iron kettle and started to boil water. Although it was a bit slow, the water could still be boiled. I once thought that water couldn't be boiled at such a low temperature. Haha, I was being ignorant. Thinking optimistically, I had learned something new. Water could be boiled even in extremely cold environments. I couldn't help but smile foolishly at the boiling water. Perhaps this was the feeling of surviving a disaster. Then I made self-heating rice and hot water for my wife, children, and Black and its wife. After eating and drinking, we could feel warmer. There was also a bit of warmth in the cellar. This period of time wasn't boring. I pedaled the pedal generator, and the light provided enough illumination. My wife and I didn't have much education. At this moment, my wife picked up a book that she hadn't read for a long time and started playing games and telling stories with the child. It looked quite warm and cozy. Although it was a disaster, it was rare that we didn't have to worry about making a living for a few pennies. It was a kind of peaceful time in the midst of the apocalypse. I would also fiddle with the radio from time to time. There was still only the sound. This meant that the situation outside was still rather bad. At least the communication hadn't been restored yet. But I firmly believed that the country would come to rescue us. So I would adjust the radio many times a day to search for channels. Time passed neither quickly nor slowly. The two children gradually got used to the current environment and would occasionally take the initiative to come out of the cellar. The two children were in front of the coal stove, roasting sweet potatoes and warming their hands. Enjoying this simple warmth, children were always carefree. The tense emotions of these few days also began to relax. At night, I slept very soundly. 15. A voice came from the radio. ZZ, XX City, XX Road has built a number of locations. ZZ, Rescue Center, in some parts of the electric power and communication are gradually recovering. Believe tenacious of life, pray for the miracle of life. Please hold on. ZZ, we never give up. Rescue team, ZZ, full rescue operation has been carried out. Try to leave a message in the obvious place for the rescue team to search and rescue. My wife and I listened to this repeated recording over and over again. We hugged each other and cried. Finally, the day we had been waiting for had arrived. Finally, my wife and I used coal ash to write a big SOS in an open area. Finally, the rescue team arrived. We were taken to a snow-armored vehicle by the soldiers. You're safe now. I also saw many villagers in the vehicle, with expressions of joy on their faces after surviving the disaster, all the way. We were heading towards the relief center. When we passed through the urban area, on both sides of the street, the originally prosperous shops and buildings were covered with thick ice and snow, looking dilapidated and silent. The windows of the buildings were broken, and the glass shards were swaying in the cold wind, making a sharp sound. The exposed steel bars and the broken walls and ruins looked even more desolate in the wind and snow. On the road, the thick snow almost covered everything. Occasionally, the frozen heads of people would be exposed, which was really shocking. Their faces were twisted, and their eyes were empty, as if telling the fear and despair of their lives before death. Their bodies were buried deep in the snow, leaving only a deathly silence. In some rooms, people who had been instantly frozen could also be seen. They maintained the postures they had at the moment of death. Some were curled up in the corner, some were lying on the ground, and some were still sitting on the sofa. There was fear and helplessness in their eyes, which made people unable to bear to look directly. My wife tightly covered the child's eyes. There were tears in her eyes, but she held them back. She was afraid that this cruel reality would scare the child. She nestled in my arms, and her body trembled involuntarily, as if looking for a little bit of security. I hugged her tightly, wanting to pass on my strength and courage to her, letting her know that no matter when, I would be by her side to protect her and the child. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid, I whispered in her ear. Our whole family is still alive. We were settled in the underground relief center. As soon as we entered, the lights were bright, and a warm atmosphere rushed towards us. It made me temporarily forget the extreme cold and horror outside. Our tense nerves relaxed a little bit. Just as we were feeling relieved, suddenly, a sharp cry came from a distance, breaking the short-lived tranquility. Then, the originally stable lights began to flicker, going on and off. People began to panic and looked around, not knowing what to do. The sounds of footsteps, shouts, and collisions intertwined, forming a terrifying symphony of fear. I looked towards the distance in confusion and saw a group of people with strange appearances slowly approaching us. Their bodies were twisted, as if they were not in control of themselves, and their faces showed ferocious expressions. The people nearby began to run, trying to escape the pursuit of these monsters. However, some people couldn't avoid them and were suddenly knocked down by these monsters. Then, the spine-chilling sounds of biting and the desperate screams echoed all around. I realized in horror that these monsters were actually zombies. I looked around, searching for a way to escape, but there were only chaotic crowds and the roars of zombies all around. Just when I was in a state of panic, I suddenly found that my wife's eyes had turned blood red. Her body also began to twitch violently and uncontrollably. She suddenly pounced on me and bit my neck. I let out a terrified scream and tried to push her away, but I couldn't break free at all. The pain spread throughout my body. I watched helplessly as she turned into a zombie. Her eyes were like a stagnant pool of water, without any vitality, and became dull and empty. I struggled, trying to find a glimmer of hope for survival, but the surroundings had become a paradise for zombies, and the screams of humans could be heard one after another. In despair, the voice from the broadcast in the relief center came. Zazila, please don't come to XX City, XX Rescue Center. Please stay away from here. Zazila, found here. Be sure to stay away from this. I suddenly woke up from my dream, covered in cold sweat, and my heart was still beating rapidly. All around was silent, with only the cold wind howling outside. I gasped for breath. trying to calm down the fear in my heart. It turned out to be another nightmare. My wife and child were still sleeping soundly beside me. We were still in the old house, taking shelter from the extreme cold. The fear and pain in that dream were too real, as if I had just experienced a life and death disaster. 16. I couldn't fall asleep anymore. I stood up and carved the vertical lines that I recorded every day on the ground. At this moment, there were already dozens of these dense vertical lines on the ground. On this day, I found that the ice on the walls of the room began to melt, and the ice layer on the ground had also disappeared without a trace. The thick clothes felt a bit hot. Strangely enough, it was still very cold in the cellar. I don't know why. Does anyone know? Please give me some scientific explanation. Then, my wife, child, and the 2 dogs, black and yellow, moved back to live on the ground. After such a long time, I finally summoned up the courage to open the door for the first time. The world outside was covered in white snow. I fiddled with the radio again. There was still only the sound. We weren't in a hurry. The biggest crisis was the low temperature, and we had survived it for now. We didn't have to worry about food and drink. It was quite good to just stay like this. The children were carefree. The children and Black and its wife were chasing and playing around in the house. However, the children were prohibited from going outside. We didn't know what the temperature was outside. The 52-degree baijiu, Chinese liquor, that I threw outside these days had frozen. The 60-degree baijiu hadn't frozen yet, although the temperature was very low. We didn't have to worry about being robbed at this temperature. An ordinary person couldn't stay outside for long. If someone wanted to come out and rob, they probably wouldn't even reach the place before they froze into ice. Even if there hadn't been the damage caused by the previous solar electromagnetic storm, ordinary civilian things like solar panels, fuel generators, and cars couldn't withstand such extreme cold. -30 degrees Celsius was already the limit for these civilian electrical appliances and equipment. Not to mention the current extreme cold that could freeze 52-degree baijiu. I had previously thought about clearing the snow in front of the door with a shovel, but when I just tapped the ground lightly with the shovel broke. My wife and I didn't plan to go out of the house either. We just tidied up the other closed rooms to expand our living space. The coal and firewood had also filled a whole room, which was enough to keep us warm for a long time. My wife developed a new skill, growing vegetables. Only then did I realize that the nutrient soil my wife had prepared earlier came in handy. Although it was cold outside, the room was already very warm at present. My wife started growing vegetables on the heated Kong, and I studied making frozen pears and frozen apples. I can responsibly tell everyone that frozen pears are much more delicious than frozen apples. Everyone should give it a try if they have the chance. We didn't have to worry about food, and there was enough water. Even if the water wasn't enough, there was snow outside. The outside world was like the end of the world, but here I felt a kind of peaceful time in the apocalypse. We didn't have to worry about personal safety either. With this terrible weather outside, if there were really bad guys who could manage to come here, I would actually admire their courage. Moreover, I still had the homemade shotgun that Lennox had prepared for me in my hand. In my spare time, I would fiddle with the radio and try to get in touch with the outside world. There was no movement in the village at the foot of the mountain either. I wasn't curious. I understood the principle that curiosity killed the cat. However, I could see wisps of smoke rising from the village in the distance. Fire is the seed of human civilization. The presence of smoke meant that the people in the village were all still alive, and we weren't alone. It was still better to stay at home, just wait quietly like this. Just as I was slowly enjoying this peaceful time and trying to forget that terrifying nightmare with its overly real fear and pain, a voice came from the radio. Zizizi, multiple rescue centers have been established on XX Road, XX City, Zizizi. The locations are. The electricity and communication in some areas are gradually being restored. Believe in the tenacity of life. Pray for the miracle of life. Please hold on. We will never give up. Zizizi, the rescue team, Zizizi, has fully launched the rescue operation. My wife burst into tears of joy and picked up the child who was playing. She said, "The rescue is coming. The rescue is coming." Then, there were bursts of firecracker sounds in the village, as if the villagers were shouting out their hope. In the surrounding villages, the sounds of firecrackers also went off one after another, conveying endless joy and hope. My wife murmured, It's so good that everyone is still alive, everyone is alive, the child asked in confusion. Mom, is it the spring festival? Why is everyone setting off firecrackers? My wife hugged the child and said, the rescue team is coming, husband. Let's also go and set off firecrackers to celebrate. My wife's growing vegetables on the heated Kong also usher in the first wave of harvest. A cucumber. My wife is still working hard to research and try growing chives blanched in the dark and lettuce. I just haven't come back to my senses yet, and I think of that terrifying nightmare of entering the relief center again. It's so good to be alive.